These virtual meetings always get a lot of participants, which is really fantastic. All right, thank you everybody. Welcome to the Strategic Growth Council meeting. It is great to have folks here virtually. I am going to start with a roll call. Can I have the staff council please lead the roll call?
Good afternoon. I'll start with Chair Gordon.
I'm here.
Assistant Secretary Soulier. You could, I believe you're not on mute.
Yeah, Julie Soulier.
Thanks, Julie.
Secretary Crowfoot.
Here.
Secretary Kim.
Here.
Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Here.
And Secretary Blumenfeld.
Yeah.
We have a quorum.
Thanks so much, everybody. And we're we're right at quorum today. So that just if anybody has to leave for any reason, we really do need you to have an alternate or we will lose quorum. So please keep that in mind as fires might start that, or literally and figuratively that you might have to deal with today. Please keep that in mind. And just as an FYI, we are going to take a short break around 3 o'clock, just because I actually have to jump off and do a very quick intro to another webinar and then come back again. So, but it's great you're here. Thank you for making the time. I know it's quite a week for us here in California. I want to go to the approval of minutes. And our counsel, Doug, has reminded me that you can approve even if you were absent at the last meeting because you have the minutes in front of you and you can approve them. You don't have to abstain if you were absent. So I didn't know that. So that's news to me. So can we have a minute to look over the minutes again, and then let's have a motion to approve them. If there is one.
I would move that we. I would second Jared's.
All right, Jared and then Wade, thank you. I guess we should do roll call just because we're all virtual. Sorry.
Sure. Chair Gordon.
Yes.
Assistant Secretary Soulier.
Julie, we didn't hear you.
I think you're on mute.
Okay. There we go. Sorry, I thought I had unmuted. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Crowfoot.
Yes.
Secretary Kim.
Aye.
Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Aye.
And Secretary Blumenfeld.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everybody. Before we start the meat of the meeting, I just want to hand it over to Sandra Lupien for some quick housekeeping on how we're going to run the virtual meeting today.
Thanks, Chair Gordon. I think everyone can hear me. Thanks to everyone for joining us today online through Zoom or on the phone, or if you're tuning in on YouTube where the meeting is also live streaming. I'm here to provide some information to help guide us all through the processes for this remote meeting, which we have designed with the intention of maximizing access by members of the public. For those joining the webinar online via Zoom or by phone, please note that your microphone will be automatically muted when you join. In order to minimize the risk of background noise, you won't be able to unmute your microphone or your phone yourself. For those joining online via Zoom, please note that the webinar platform doesn't enable video for attendees, so we won't be able to see you. If you need technical assistance during the meeting or have questions about the meeting process, there are a few ways to contact us, and you can see them on the screen before you if you're watching on Zoom. If you're using the online Zoom webinar, the best way to get help is by using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, which several members of our team are monitoring. And if you've joined by phone and have access to email, please email sgc.info@sgc.ca.gov if you need assistance that you can't get on the Q&A in Zoom. And if you do not have access to email, you may text or call the number you see on your screen, 916-634-3359. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about public comment. So if you plan to make public comment at today's meeting, you must be joining the meeting via Zoom, either using the webinar or phone option. First, visit sgc.ca.gov and the meetings page, which you can see on your screen, to complete the public comment form that's linked there. You'll need to complete a separate form for each item on which you wish to speak, and you may complete the form at any time during the meeting. When Chair Gordon opens the floor for public comment on that item, we will read the names of everyone who submitted a form for the item. When you hear your name in that list, please use the raise hand function to make it easy for us to find you in the participants list. And the way to raise your hand in Zoom is by clicking raise hand under participants. And then if you want to raise your hand and you're on the phone, press *9. When it's your turn to speak, a member of our team, probably me, will unmute your microphone. And if you're online, you'll see a pop-up alerting you that the host is unmuting you. You'll need to click that option to approve unmute. And after that, just begin speaking. If you're on the phone, you'll hear a recorded message alerting you that your line has been unmuted. And after you hear that message, you can just begin speaking. Each speaker will have a maximum of 2 minutes to make your remarks. If you're online, you'll see a timer pop up on your screen, so please monitor that and wrap up your remarks accordingly. Whether you're online or on the phone, Chair Gordon will notify you when your time is up, and after that, we'll mute your microphone again. I don't think you'll need to take any additional action to remute yourself. Finally, if you're unable to complete the online form but would like to make a public comment, please feel free to email sgc.info@sgc.ca.gov. And lastly, this note is for members of the council. To notify Chair Gordon that you'd like to enter a conversation, simply use the raise hand function in Zoom and she'll call on you in turn. After you speak, please try to remember to click the button to lower your hand. Otherwise, we'll do that for you. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was great. Really appreciate it. And this worked pretty well in our last council meeting. So looking forward to a lot of good participation and Zoom engagement. We do have an exciting meeting today, in particular, the SGC Racial Equity Action Plan update, which I know many of us talked about last time. Before we go into the agenda, wanted to do our usual moment to have council members provide any important updates on work that you're doing that is advancing the work we all do towards strategic growth. So if you want to make a comment, please do raise your hand and I will find you. I've got David Kim, Secretary Kim, go ahead. And remember to unmute before you make your comment. Oh. David, you're
sorry about that. Hope you can hear me now. Thank you, Chair Gordon, and good afternoon to fellow council members as well as members of the public. Wanted to give a quick update on racial equity and justice in transportation. And I second the chair's comment, really excited about the panel that will be coming up later in this meeting. Looking forward to hearing from them. You might recall that CalSTA put out a statement back in June, and we are now taking steps to turn those words into meaningful action. One of these actions is supporting a group of 16 staff from our agency and the various CalSTA departments to participate in the Capital Collaborative on Race and Equity, which is also known as CORE training. I think many of you know that CORE is a racial equity capacity building program for state employees. It provides 50 hours of racial equity training over a period of 15 months. And very importantly, it's made possible through a partnership with SGC's racial equity program. So big kudos to SGC for helping to make this training opportunity possible. The first session took place just this past week, and we've got participants from CalSTA, Caltrans, CHP, DMV, High Speed Rail Authority, Office of Traffic Safety, and New Motor Vehicle Board. All of these individuals make up the CalSTA core team, and so we're really excited about the training they're going through now and what it'll eventually mean for all of our departments. Also want to briefly mention that CalSTA is supporting the efforts of the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names, which is managed by Wade and his team at the Natural Resources Agency. What we're going to do is help to identify any names that are associated with transportation facilities that might be outdated. So for example, are there any state-owned highways, bridges, tunnels, interchanges, and so forth that are named after individuals whose histories are marked by acts of racism, discrimination, or oppression? Also, on a related note, big kudos to Squaw Valley Ski Resort for making the decision just recently to change their name. They did a lot of outreach to Native American groups, and they agreed that changing their name would be the right thing to do. I had the great pleasure of meeting the CEO of Squaw Valley, Ron Cohen, at the very beginning of ski season, and he deserves a lot of credit for taking this important step. Also want to briefly touch on implementation of the governor's climate change executive order, N1919. First, a big thanks to the many stakeholders and interested parties for their early engagement with us. And just to refresh your memory, since it's been 11 months since the executive order came out, N1919 directs CalSTA to leverage discretionary transportation funds to reduce GHG emissions in the transportation sector. And I think it really lines up well with our current circumstances as we think about economic recovery and the future of transportation in a post-pandemic world. And as I think we've all learned over the past many months, there is a direct connection between respiratory diseases like COVID-19 and air quality and carbon emissions. So it really underscores the importance of making transportation investments in a way that reduces the climate crisis instead of exacerbating it. So we've held quite a few early stakeholder engagement meetings over the past 5 months. In fact, we've talked to over 200 partners about what the executive order can mean for California. And we really appreciate everyone who responded to our most recent survey. We're going through survey results right now, and we'll spend the next couple of weeks incorporating feedback to make sure that strategies and potential actions we take embrace the sentiment of stakeholders as much as possible. We're also going to hold workshops this fall, and that will give everyone further opportunities to weigh in. And also at the next joint meeting of the Transportation Commission, CARB, and HCD, which will take place in early November, we're going to give an update and also lead a discussion with members of the three bodies. So there's a lot happening on the executive order, and our goal is to finalize a transportation action plan in the first half of 2021. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you for the time, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Secretary Kim, for all of those really important updates. And we are, in fact, coming up to Climate Week again, and that was where the governor did the announcement last year of the executive order. And so it's great to hear progress on that. And I know many others on the council have been working on aspects of that executive order as well. I did have Secretary Blumenfeld's hand up, but now I don't see it. Secretary Blumenfeld?
I just was putting it down because, in case it caused confusion. Thank you, Chair Gordon, appreciate that. So lots of things happening. Start with the good news, which was reported, but just wanted everyone on the council, since we are reliant on GGRF funding. As we remember, the last auction back in May of Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund allowances only brought in 18 million, depending how you look on it. The maximum was 25 million. Yesterday, the announcement was 475 million for that auction. This time last year, it was around 600 million, so significantly better than the last auction. It gives us some optimism about the ability to start looking at how to program that for the important work that this and other committees and parts of the state government use that money for. So good news on that front. Two big things happening tomorrow in front of the California Air Resources Board. One is a regulation that would establish NOx emission standards for heavy duty vehicles. Those standards would be 90% lower than standards that are in place today. It's the equivalent of taking about 16 million cars off the road. And if adopted, it would save approximately $37 billion in healthcare costs for Californians. In addition, there's an at-berth regulation for ocean-going vessels that tightens shore power requirements for a variety of vessels docking at California ports. And these will also lead to significant diesel, PM, and NOx reductions. It would be about a 55% decrease in cancer risk for Californians near the ports of LA, Long Beach, and the oil port container at Richmond. So these are significant, I think, in that the governor has been very focused on both helping racial equity issues and environmental justice and reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other criteria pollutants, and the decisions that will likely be forthcoming from the CARB board tomorrow kind of double down on that. And then obviously we particularly weighed on the fire front, but also us, Cal Recycle has a responsibility of doing the cleanup, and DTSC is kind of the first on the scene to take the hazardous material away. Those folks are starting to be deployed. And at the same time, we're seeing very, very elevated poor air quality indexes throughout the state and right here in Sacramento right now. And I think it's just another reminder of the important work that you and Wade and Karen and others are doing on resiliency. And, you know, we are living in a climate emergency today. This isn't something for tomorrow, and the costs are extraordinary. Just to give you a sense, Cal Recycle alone, just on the camp and Woolsey fire last year, spent $2.2 billion on cleanup. So that's a massive cost, a massive human cost as well, and property. So we're living through it again, and it just feels like, you know, the importance of interagency coordination that you help lead, Kate, here with all these entities. If we didn't have it, we'd have to create it, because climate change really does spread across every single one of our agencies very directly. So that's the update from me this month.
Thank you so much, and really important reminders of why it is so important to be working across agencies. So, and thanks for all the work you and your team are doing. I don't see any other hands. I do see that Secretary Ross has joined us and is physically raising her hand, so I will go to her.
Because I found out just now in the Broadband Council meeting, I'm supposed to have a hand over participants, and for whatever reason, I don't have it. So I have to do this. Sorry. I did want to touch on a couple of things. One is that we have been conducting what we're calling Partnerships for Soil Health workshops. And it came out of something that Mary Nichols and I did last year with a couple of restaurateurs out of San Francisco who were raising funds and wanted to be able to have some way of partnering with the state to do verification so that we could get the totality of the practices on the ground to sequester carbon and improve soil health and productivity. And so we've been doing these workshops to try to figure out what is the right balance of the state doing this. It's private dollars, but they want to use the same practices, which is good, science-based practices. We would love for them to use our quantification methodology so we can get those total estimates. But what does it look like? What is the right balance for verification? It's not an offset, it's not a formal offset program, it's a partnership. And so we have at least one more workshop, and then we're going to be putting together a framework, and we will want to circulate that to all of you for input on that. It's a new way for us to go, but I think it's really important when we talk about scaling up healthy soils. As part of that, we have a federal state working group on-farm composting, and Arma Cosina, who's managing the interagency soil health initiative, is leading that on our behalf, and it's coming at a very important time as we saw the sheer number of applications for our last round of healthy soils projects. They were throughout the state from Imperial County all the way to Humboldt. And we had folks in every county and lots of really creative projects. So doing more on-farm composting is going to be an important answer to that. For those of you who might have missed the big release from the California Rangeland Trust, which has been a beneficiary of a number of our SALT grants, they had been working with UC Berkeley over the last year and a half, and they released their report about 3 weeks ago on actually quantifying the benefit of ecosystem services. So on their approximately 400,000 acres that they've conserved, they estimate a monetary value of somewhere between 990 million and $1.4 billion. And I just love to get those kinds of things that help us quantify nature's capital. And then I too, Mr. Kim, I wanted to say, we love the collaborative on racial equity. We have our first cohort this year, and the meetings last week or the week before, people are so excited, and we really are so thrilled to be a part of this. And so kudos to all of you who put that together and pioneered the way, and all the rest of us will be beneficiaries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Ross. I have Julie Soulier, who's here for Secretary Galley.
Hi, so I just really wanted to take the opportunity to mention that there are new census flyers available, and that we can, I think Louise has copies of those and we can share those out. But with the operations date and the count changing with the end date to September 30th, just wanted to mention that to folks, and the flyers are available in both English and Spanish for right now. So just wanted to put that on folks' radar, and we can share those out.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks so much for everything your agency continues to do to get ahead of this pandemic. We all know that we can't do strategic growth in this state without getting a handle on this first. And we just really appreciate all the work that your agency is doing out there on the front lines. So thank you for that.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, I didn't really provide an update on that because I think folks are pretty well tracking, you know, what is going on there. There's really, there aren't a lot of other things that we're working on at this moment that take quite the priority that this does, other than perhaps fire is our new crisis, of course. So yeah, folks are doing an amazing job on the front lines in both of those areas. And so we're really appreciative and grateful for all the work that people are doing.
Well, thank you for it. I have Secretary Castro Ramirez's hand up.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Just a few updates. I think during our last meeting, I mentioned to you all that we were launching an initiative that Governor Newsom announced that was basically building on the success of Project Room Key. This initiative is called Home Key, which is really the opportunity to be able to work with locals to purchase hotels and hotels and convert them into permanent housing for individuals experiencing homelessness that have been impacted by COVID-19. I'm pleased to share with you all that NOFA was released about a month ago, and the first priority deadline, we received 138 applications for just over $1 billion in funding requests, which is much more than the dollars that were appropriated and allocated. We have about $600 million available, and you know, just this first priority application deadline, we received over $1 billion in requests. The Housing and Community Development team, HCD, they're through the you know, due diligence and review of applications, and we expect to be able to make announcements on the first few set of awards, hopefully in the next week or so. So that's, you know, very exciting, and you know, stay tuned for more on that. Secondly, I do also want to mention that within BCSH, we also work closely with the Homeless Coordinating and Financing Council. It's part of the agency. And we recently released guidance for local governments and continuums of care on the most sort of effective use of federal and state dollars as it relates to being able to provide support and services and sheltering, and then also leading to permanent housing. So if you're interested in accessing that, visit our HCFC website or, you know, BCSH website. And then thirdly, we've been, you know, actively involved and engaged with the governor's office on identifying legislative solutions to address the, you know, grave, you know, concerns that we all have and share with regard to the potential for many families being at you know, at risk of being evicted due to frankly the lack of any sort of federal agreement for additional funding to provide either supplemental unemployment insurance or to provide rental assistance or assistance to the small landlords. So we're actively, you know, working to identify some solutions, and I will share that our agency, BCSH, is also preparing to coordinate a comprehensive communications and education campaign to help with disseminating information with regard to resources and protections that will be available. But this is, a big concern for many of us, and we're actively in discussions on that. And then actually one more thing that I'll mention, just within agency, we have several departments that are either directly responsible for administering dollars to preserve or expand affordable housing, or indirectly involved with regulatory oversight or enforcement of fair housing, or just overall sort of civil rights enforcement. And so one of my priorities has been, as we advance the goals that the governor has established in terms of accelerating affordable housing production, and then also making sure that we're paying attention to the need for housing for families that are very low income or extremely low income. We've initiated an effort that brings all of our housing departments together to basically strengthen our alignment and our coordination, and then to ensure that we're frankly not as siloed as sometimes even within an agency one can be. So we started an effort to take a deep dive in terms of understanding the overall affordable housing finance system. What are we producing? At what cost? Where can we accelerate the process? And then also, how do we better align and strengthen our process so that when affordable housing developers are competing for CITLAC or TCAC funds, that we're able to move that process along a lot more quickly. So just a lot of work underway within BCSH. We have an amazing team, and much of this work, of course, touches all of you. And so with that, I will end my report here, Chairwoman.
Thank you so much. That was a great update, and really appreciate all of that work, particularly as we're looking at, as you said, the real concern about evictions hitting the state in a significant way. I have Secretary Crowfoot's hand up.
Yeah, just briefly, I feel the need to underscore a point that Jared made earlier, which is, I think more than ever, we are now realizing we're amidst a climate emergency. When I got into this work, almost 2 decades ago, climate adaptation was that sort of wonky planning exercise for the future. And all of the action and focus was on reducing pollution, greenhouse gas pollution. We obviously need to continue to reduce our emissions, but we know right now that climate change is here. These unprecedented heat waves were absolutely devastating, combined with that electrical storm that really came up from the tropics. Simply put, these wildfires demonstrate that we can't respond our way out of this climate crisis. We have to build resilience. And whether it's on wildfires or to protect communities against extreme heat or to build the resilience of our grid, the time is now to really bring that urgency. So I just think it's an important moment to reiterate just the stakes that we face right now. Second point is before our next meeting, 2 important days or sort of observations will occur. The first Native American Day in late September. I think a lot of us are excited about burgeoning partnerships with tribes. We at the Natural Resources Agency are on a journey to learn a lot more from our tribal partners around natural resource management, moving towards co-management of resources. And so we'll be hopefully rolling out several announcements over the next year on that front. One of the most exciting announcements is the establishment of our first ever Assistant Secretary for Tribal Affairs, who will focus on really institutionalizing tribal consultation and partnerships across our agency. The second observation that will occur before our next SGC meeting is California Biodiversity Day. We talk a lot about and celebrate our cultural diversity, which is a real strength of our state, but we talk less about our natural richness. We are one of the planet's biodiverse hotspots, meaning we have a natural richness of plants and animals almost unparalleled anywhere on the planet. And our agency, in partnership with CDFA and Cal EPA and so many others, is focused on really building a more aggressive, more coherent approach to maintaining that natural richness and not waiting for plants and animals to be on the verge of extinction before we protect them. So excited with momentum that we'll be able to demonstrate this coming year on biodiversity too. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks so much, and really appreciate you underscoring, and also Secretary Blumenfeld underscoring the importance of climate resilience. It's something here at SGC, we obviously do a lot of thinking about the state's land use and planning decisions, and that's so integrally connected with this question of how resilient different parts of the state are and different sectors are to our current climate impact. So there's a real overlap, and we're at OPR very pleased that our integrated climate adaptation resilience program works so closely with natural resources and with many of the rest of you, CDFA and others, on those key issues. I will just do very quick OPR updates, and then we'll move on. This has been an incredibly rich conversation, so thank you. Just a couple of things from us that are actually fairly related to what other people talked about. One is that today we actually put out a beta version of a mapping tool that we've been working on for quite a long time, which goes to something that Secretary Castro Ramirez talked about, which is the critical need to figure out ways to make it easier to build affordable housing and build particularly in places where people have jobs near housing, near services, and not the need to drive as much as they often do. We've been working with HCD for the last over a year on a tool called Site Check, which actually takes all of the existing CEQA exemptions that are based on sites being already environmentally sort of preferable places to build, not on top of floodplains, not on top of high fire risk areas, infill sites near services and jobs, essentially layers all of the exemptions on top of each other so that developers can see the places in the state that are the most streamlined under CEQA because they already meet so many of our critical environmental and climate goals, as well as our affordable housing and access and equity goals. So that's beta version came out today. There was a webinar today, but we're working with, I know many of you who are here listening in on testing that tool and giving us feedback and making it as strong as it can be. The full release will be in January of next year. I also wanted to say briefly, and touching on something that Secretary Blumenfeld talked about, just that OPR continues with many of you and also with the labor agency to do work around the idea of sort of diversifying our economies in different parts of the state, and really what we often call just transition, but is also sort of just a high road economic development agenda. We're working with the Labor Department on, we've provided some resources in Kern County for a multi-stakeholder effort to come up with a way forward, a data-driven way forward on diversifying that economy. And we're not participating in that. We are observers, and we are there to support and there to provide technical assistance if asked, but that's really a region-driven process that goes directly to that point about some of our sectors really being not prepared in terms of the economic impacts of some of the transition we're seeing. And COVID has really underscored that, frankly, of what happens if your region is not resilient in the face of economic disaster. So that work is ongoing. And finally, also thrilled to be part of the core work that many others have talked about already. So with that, I'm going to turn things to Louise Bedsworth for the Executive Director's update.
Great. Thank you so much. Sorry, I was having trouble finding my mute. I don't know why. That was terrific. And I will try to be fairly brief since we will hear a couple of really in-depth updates from our program, and especially on the racial equity work in just a bit. But we're thrilled that we have so many member agencies participating, and we're excited to be participating again as well. So next slide. So I'll just run through a few quick organizational updates, some staffing, general organization, and then a few very specific program updates. There's a lot more in the ED memo that was included in the packet, but I'll just hit a few highlights. And then I'll turn it over to Sloan Viola to provide a legislative update. Next slide. First, I have to take a moment and acknowledge our departing fellows. We've had an incredible year. We've been lucky to have 2 fellows, an executive fellow, and then one of the CCST Science Policy Fellows, one of the first to be placed in the executive branch. And I just want to acknowledge that both of them are departing. Sarah Samden has been with SGC all year. She's ending her fellowship at the end of this week. She's just been an incredible asset to our team. She was a big contributor to the annual report, which I will mention in just a moment. She's been helping us really look at our website, ensuring accessibility, clarity. She's co-managed the SGC internship program with OPR's wonderful executive fellow. And I didn't list it here, but she also has been integral in helping us adapt a lot of our processes to be through formats like this. And so she's just been an incredible asset. We're very excited that she is going to be hopefully continuing on as a state employee. And we're just thrilled to have her with us this year and then to see where she goes in the future. She's been wonderful. And then Christina Echeverria, our science policy fellow, actually left us earlier this month. She's been a critical member of our climate change research team, but she's also just helped out in so many ways. She supported our Community Assistance for Climate Equity team and has really been working a lot to understand how our partners are working through and contributing to our research grants, which is a critical piece of that program. So she's been wonderful. She's actually moved on to CARB, and so we're thrilled that we will actually continue to be able to work with her on a number of our programs. But I just want to take a minute to acknowledge both of them. The fellows programs are just incredible assets to, I think, all of state agencies. And I think really is helping to just build a whole new generation of public servants. And we've been very, very lucky to have excellent fellows. And this year was certainly no exception. So Sarah, Christina, thank you all both very, very much. We will miss you, but we are very excited to see the wonderful contributions that you'll continue to make. Next slide, please. Which probably seems anticlimactic after all of that because they're so wonderful. But this is actually another terrific accomplishment that we're very, very proud of, which is that we just submitted our annual report to the legislature. SGC is required in our statute to submit an annual report on our investments. But this year, Sandra Lupian, our Chief External Affairs Officer, who's been with us for just a year, just had her 1-year anniversary, led a team that, as I mentioned, included Sarah and a couple of our interns, and then also our student assistant, who just did an incredible job of building out a more narrative arc to the work that we're doing. And so they've got the work organized by themes, by programs, but I think even more exciting, so a number of profiles of projects that are underway and a lot of the folks on the ground who are doing the work with the grants that we've made. So I would just encourage people to take a look at this. It's wonderful content, really fun to read. And I would say also quite easy to read, given the wonderful design that our graphic designer, Michael Wilson, did. So this was just a really great accomplishment. We're excited for this evolution of the annual report and hope it is a useful resource to our council members, certainly, but also helps to tell the story of the work that's happening around the state through our programs and partnerships and the collaborative policy work that we're all doing. Next slide, please. So the final organizational update I'll provide is just on our ongoing conversation around a work plan. We have been engaging key staff in scoping, and we'll be doing some activity mapping to really understand, especially with where we are right now with COVID-19 and the intersecting emergencies and demands that are being placed on is sort of how SGC can be most useful in that space and build upon a lot of the work that is going on. We also have a couple of new initiatives, our health and equity team, which folks are familiar with the staff who joined us in April, which have added capacity both to our health and all policies team, but also in just thinking broadly about how to extend our health and equity work. And then we also will be building out a small team to implement Assembly Bill 285. And so we're trying to figure out amongst the different initiatives that are happening, including Executive Order N1919 and the ongoing housing and transportation conversations, among other things, how we can best situate this work and strategically move this, move the collaborative work of the policy forward. So, or sorry, collaborative work of the council forward. So we're going to continue on that, and then we'll convene our council work group, hopefully this fall, and bring next steps to the council later this year. Next slide, please. Now I'll provide a few more specific programmatic updates. I wanted to have provide two in particular that were directly came out of our June council meeting. And the first is with the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program. At that council meeting, we had a lot of robust discussion around the award recommendations. I think we heard a lot of really helpful feedback from applicants, both successful and unsuccessful in that program. We held a 10-day public comment period right after the awards were made, and met with several stakeholder groups and applicants. And so I just wanted to give a highlight of some of the major issues that we heard. I think many of them reiterated what was discussed at the council meeting. One around regional distribution of awards, how to fund and support the sustainability of transit going forward, especially given the disruptions that we've seen through the pandemic, and then also home ownership. So our staff is working closely with HCD on the question around home ownership and trying to look at it not just in the context of AHSC, but also in the context of the broader constellation of state housing programs. We're working closely with CalSTA and Caltrans on transit and really thinking about how to integrate it into the program and thinking about how we can adjust scoring in light of the current challenges. And then we've also been having a number of conversations around regional distribution of awards and how scoring has affected that and how different aspects of the program can be adjusted to ensure that we have equitable access to the program. We've had several stakeholder meetings, as I mentioned, and the biggest desire has been for an inclusive and open process as we go through some of these changes. And so we're currently updating our timeline and preparing draft guidelines, which will go through a 30-day public comment period. And so we'll continue to work on that, and we're remaining flexible and open to the types of changes that might be necessary and the timeline that that will require. So originally we were looking at bringing the guidelines to the council in October, but if we need more time, we will be adjusting that. And so I just want to say we're having really excellent conversations, and I think this has been a really good opportunity for us to look at the program in detail and how it can continue to advance our goals and the statutory objectives of the program, but also meet the needs of the diverse regions of the state. So next slide. Another request that came up at the June council meeting was to think about options for a more sustainable funding source for the Transformative Climate Communities program. And so there is a draft memo, or a memo that I drafted that is included in the meeting materials as part of the executive director's report. And I'll just highlight 3 paths that we've recommended after some consultation across our different programmatic staff of options that we see. And I think all of these are worthy of being pursued together, since none of them are there. They all have some uncertainty associated with them. The first is, I think most strongly would be to include TCC in the fiscal year 21-22 budget, either through GGRF or through general fund. I think this would signal a strong support of the program and the objectives that it's achieving and striving to implement in serving our most disadvantaged communities. The second is to position TCC as part of a state or federal COVID-19 economic or community recovery package. We have 15 planning grants that have been completed or are underway that have ready to go projects in communities that we also know have been incredibly hard hit by COVID-19. And so I do think TCC is in an excellent position to be part of a toolbox as we think about helping communities recover, especially in the integration of how we think about infrastructure investment, workforce and economic development, and support of communities in place and leading with community vision. And then finally, the third recommendation is that we consider for a longer term action is including TCC or TCC-like project, a catalytic project type, if you will, within the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program. We see this as something that would require a significant amount of analytical work and partnership with our stakeholders. And so we would look at this not for this coming round, which is round 6, but for round 7. So those are 3 recommendations that we would make, and we will continue to explore and look at the feasibility of. And you can see a little bit more discussion of each of those in the memo. Next slide, please. While we're talking about TCC, I did just want to provide a quick update, which is to say, actually work is moving very, very quickly with our round 3 grant agreements and the awards that we made in the June meeting. And this includes rescoping of Stockton's project to adjust to the budget that we had available. And so we'll have an update on what that looks like in its final form in October, but it's very exciting to see how quickly our awardees are moving forward on this. And so we should be able to get grant agreements completed much more rapidly than we have. And I think that just shows the ongoing maturity of the program and the high quality of projects that we have in this round. We're also launching a disadvantaged unincorporated communities work group to implement SB 351, which is a bill signed last year that directs SGC to look at how to integrate disadvantaged unincorporated communities as eligible applicants in TCC. So we are engaging with stakeholders and other state agency partners on this. And then finally, we are continuing to work with our 15 planning grantees to track infrastructure projects and identify potential funding sources. This is actually has been very helpful, and also some of the funding opportunities that have been coming along with the CARES Act and some other federal opportunities. So we're just continuing to try to scour resources and try to make some connections there. Next slide, please. The health equity program I mentioned earlier, and we will hear quite a bit on the racial equity work in the next item. I did just want to take a moment to talk about some work that's going on with the HIAP task force, the Health and All Policies task force. With the addition of the new staff at SGC, we now have capacity across California Department of Public Health, the Public Health Institute, and SGC to really think about how the HIAP task force, which has been around for 10 years, bringing together numerous state agencies to center health and equity, how we can strategically align that with work moving forward. And so there's a lot of conversation happening across task force members. And then we're also working with the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley to help us think through this. You already heard the core learning cohort kicked off last week. And then we've also been supporting the Office of the Surgeon General to conduct a survey of state agencies on trauma-informed approaches related to the adverse childhood experiences work that she is such a leader on. And so that has been going around to state agencies, and we've just been trying to help get the word out through networks at HIAP and through SGC. Next slide, please. So my final update is just on the Tribal Government Challenge. We entered into a partnership with the California Energy Commission to award some remaining ARA funds through a Tribal Government Challenge, which I know we've talked about over the last year. But we are very excited to have 8 planning grants that we will be awarding to the tribes listed here. The bottom 3 all working together on a grant. And so you can see a nice geographic distribution. All of these awards are pending grant agreement execution and finalization with the tribal governments. So we will have additional details on the amounts and the content coming up. But I just wanted to give an update on the success of that program and how we're very excited to see this work getting underway. We also, in that partnership, have entered into a contract to conduct a gap analysis to understand climate and energy needs and work happening across tribal lands in California. And we will be working on that over the coming year. And that is hopefully something that will be of use to a number of ongoing efforts in the future, including the state's climate change assessment process, but I think other work that is getting underway. So that is my final update. I'm happy to answer some questions if there are any, and then I can pass it over to Sloan.
Great, thank you, Louise. From the council members, any questions or comments on that portion of the executive director report, which had a lot of different pieces to it? So Secretary Crowfoot.
Thanks, Louise. Helpful report. Regarding the tribal government challenge, the planning grants that we hope to award to those tribal governments are focused on what areas? Can they be focused on sort of general planning and capacity building, or specifically focused on energy and climate?
Specifically on energy and climate, with both on mitigation and resilience, but because of the funding source, there really is a tie back on energy, but really, trying to think about them in a systemic way.
Got it, thanks.
Louise, this is Lourdes. Just a follow-up question. And so is there also a set aside or funds for implementation? So they're going through the planning component, and then there'll be a submittal for dollars.
Yeah, this funding is only available for planning. This was the funds that were available. I think the hope is that some of this work can position these tribes well for some other state funding programs. And so that is an area where we will continue to work, as we have with other planning grantees, to make connections as we're able.
I would recommend then that we also look at federal resources. So as we think about the planning process and opportunities to go after funding, taking a look at what federal resources are being made available would be helpful. And I also think that it'll be important as part of the overall assessment and analysis that's going to be conducted to take a look at what analysis or assessments have already been conducted at the federal level, because at least a few years ago, there was, a lot of work in that space. I can't say where that's at now, but I know a few years ago, there was a lot of, work that was done in this space.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, and I think you will hear later in the meeting when you hear from Kiran Kumar, our Community Assistance for Climate Equity Program Manager. Tribal technical assistance is also an area, and you'll hear about actually also in the technical assistance guidelines, that has been an area of focus for us. I think the work we did through the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program was really valuable. But I think that's another piece that can be really important as we think about how to go from planning to implementation, is being able to provide some of that technical assistance, which is an area of focus, not just for SGC, but I know for a number of other agencies who have been helping us out with that work.
Great questions. And I really want to agree with the looking at federal grant opportunities. I know in our kind of regular updates that OPR is statutorily we're statutorily responsible for regular updates on federal grant opportunities, and tribal opportunities are actually numerous. So it's a great reminder to look for that. Sorry, I'm managing. So Secretary Crowfoot, just for folks to know, is still here, just not on video, but I'm getting a text that he's still here. So he's still part of our quorum, just making sure everybody knows that. We're still good. Oh, he's there. We can actually see him, but he's about to go off video is what I'm hearing, Wade.
Yeah, sorry, Kate, I need to drop off for just a moment. So I'm actually going to ask Amanda Hansen, our Deputy Secretary, to turn on our video and serve in my capacity.
Thank you, appreciate it. We'll see you when you're able to come back. Thank you. Any other questions on that portion of the Executive Director update? I wanted to say thank you, Louise and staff, for really hearing some of the things raised at the last meeting, and particularly for putting so much thought into TCC strategies. I think we're all very eager to figure that out. And so thank you for putting time into that. Really recommend everybody take some time with the memo that is part of the packet that you have. We're, I think, moving on, Louise, to the ledge update. Is that right?
Yes, so we'll turn it over to Sloan.
All right. Good afternoon, council members. I'm Sloan Viola, the legislative director here with an update on the 2020 legislative session with bills that are relevant to the Strategic Growth Council. Next slide, please. So we started out the year with quite a few bills that were relevant to the Strategic Growth Council, but now we're down to about 4. This is partly just due to the nature of the legislative process with bills being held in committee and not passing votes. But this year, the winnowing of bills was especially harsh due to the COVID crisis and limited the accelerated schedule that the legislature is operating under. The bills I'm going to discuss today are all on the floor of the second house. So assembly bills are on the Senate floor and Senate bills are on the assembly floor. And they're waiting their votes from the other house before being sent on to the governor. AB 2800 by Assemblymember Quirk, I have mentioned at previous meetings. This bill extends AB 2800 from 2015, which required state agencies to consider climate risk in their infrastructure planning, financing, and maintenance. This bill also established a climate safe infrastructure working group to make recommendations on best practices. Going forward, this working group only convenes as the resources allow. And additionally, this extension removes provisions that required the working group to make a presentation on its findings and report to the Strategic Growth Council because that report was presented previously. So extending these provisions on something that has already happened and isn't projected to happen again is more of a consistency issue. SB 1320 by Senator Stern codifies the California Climate Change Assessment as a responsibility of OPR, which would be conducted in partnership with the Strategic Growth Council, the Natural Resources Agency, and the Energy Commission. Next slide, please. And then AB 1659 is actually hot off the presses. It was just introduced yesterday. This bill creates a wildfire bond. It authorizes $3 billion in spending on wildfire prevention, forest management, emergency response, and resilience projects. And this is supported by an initial $500 million transfer from the surplus money investment fund. And then later it's supported by bonds that are backed by an extension of the fee on the utility bills. And this bond has numerous provisions and spending requirements, one of which is a requirement that $300 million of the funding goes to the Strategic Growth Council to support vulnerable communities through projects like clean air centers, hydration stations, backup power generation, and emergency shelters. And then finally, AB 2028 by Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry amends the Bagley-Keene Open Meetings Act. So this is a bill that more affects how we operate in this structure of our public meetings. This bill, in its current form, repeals provisions that prohibit public comment at meetings on items that were previously discussed at a meeting where all members of the entity were present and the public was given the opportunity to comment. So this means that if the council were to have a meeting and there was an agenda item that was discussed at a previous meeting where all council members were present and the public was given the opportunity to comment, at that subsequent meeting, the council would still be required to accept public comment on that same item again. And that is all I have for you, short and sweet. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
Thanks so much, Sloan. Really appreciate it. Do we have any questions from council members? I will just remind everybody again, I think Sloan said this at the beginning, that these are not enacted bills. These are bills that are on the table still for discussion. The legislation is not over yet. It's sometimes hard to keep track, but that is the state of these bills at this moment. Anybody want to speak or ask questions to any of these? Thank you again, Sloan. Sandra, do we have any public comment on the executive director's report item?
Chair Gordon, I see no comment cards on this item.
Fantastic. We will move to the stars of the day, who are the folks talking to us about the SGC Racial Equity Action Plan and updating resolution. So I'm going to turn things over to Jesse Buendia, who's the Deputy Director of SGC.
Okay, well, let's just start with the fact that being introduced as the stars of the day is the best thing that's going to happen all day for me, for sure. And the fact that I have a suite of other co-presenters with me, I mean, I think we should go get drinks afterwards. So thank you, Chair Gordon, for that. And good afternoon, council members. So as was mentioned, my name is Jessie Buendia. I'm the Deputy Director of the California Strategic Growth Council. I'm also the executive sponsor of SGC's Racial Action Plan. And so I'm here to talk to you about race. Next slide, please. Great, thanks, Fabiha. So at the June council meeting, in response to the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many others, the council members, you, made important public comments denouncing the historical, institutional, and structural racism, and also calling for the valuing of Black lives. And I hear that reiterated today. We hope to build on that leadership and respond to the governor's call to action to do more and to do better. Next slide, please. Last year, we were proud that SGC became the first state-level multi-agency body in the country to adopt a racial equity vision statement and a racial equity action plan. In addition to establishing the racial equity action plan as an ongoing council agenda item, and using council meetings as a forum to discuss racial equity best practices. Next slide, please. So we're hoping to deliver on that promise today. Today, the council will hear from SGC on the progress of our racial equity action plan. You'll also hear from my colleague, Holly Nickel at the Public Health Institute, who will provide an update on the Capital Collaborative on Race and Equity, also known as CORE, although much of that definition is not needed given the amount of championing we've already heard about the CORE program from our council members. You'll also hear a really dynamic panel presentation from racial equity champions from across 3 state agencies. And of course, we will end with the cherry on top, the historic vote on the council-led racial equity resolution. Next slide, please. So let me go ahead and begin. We are so proud that over the course of the last year, SGC has made significant progress on over 35 different action items in our racial equity action plan. For this presentation, however, I will focus on only 3 key areas that the council asked us to prioritize: workforce equity, racial equity in programs, and racial equity in technical assistance. Thank you. All right, so workforce equity, our first example. Last year, SGC executive leadership established a goal to have SGC reflect the diversity of the state of California. We collected baseline data on our staff demographics and benchmarked it to California's civil service population and California's population as a whole. We began incorporating workforce equity best practices, such as integrating an equity statement and equity measures into job duty statements and preferred qualifications, sending job postings directly to contacts at more than 50 organizations that serve and reflect California's diverse communities, introducing all SGC staff to the concepts and implications of implicit bias, and sending hiring managers to implicit bias training offered by Cali PA. Thank you, Cali PA. Also anonymizing all job applications to help eliminate bias and ensuring that race and gender diversity was on all of our hiring panels. Our goal is to analyze the data, report on outcomes on an annual basis, and then incorporate our lessons learned. Next slide. So here you go. We're proud to report that the results of these collective actions, as a result of the collection of actions, position openings have seen an increase in diverse qualified candidates. People of color now fill 83% of SGC's new positions. As of 2020, SGC staff demographics reflect a balance between people of color and white people, with people of color in the slight majority. We also learned from the data that while SGC represents the state's diversity, it can improve its hiring practices by attracting and recruiting more qualified Hispanic, or my preferred term, Latinx candidates. We also learned that our data collection process could really benefit from having an opportunity for staff to verify and refresh their records. Next year, we'll be administering a workforce survey in partnership with Race Forward that will more holistically understand how to make SGC an inclusive work environment. Next slide. Our second example is focused on program development and implementation. Last year, SGC scanned its 4 investment programs and learned that it had yet to make an award to a California Native American tribe. And in the case of most of our programs, a tribe had never applied. SGC's executive leadership and staff explored how to better serve tribes by establishing a holistic strategy that would include multiple actions, analyzing and reporting on outcomes, and incorporating lessons learned. Some of these you've already had an opportunity to hear about, but let me remind the public. Last year, SGC executive leadership and staff partnered with the California Energy Commission on the Tribal Challenge Grants, with the intention of building staff capacity to partner with tribes, and successfully awarded 8 tribes awards that will advance their tribal priorities for energy independence and energy and climate resilience. The council also approved a tribal set-aside for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program this year, and awarded its first HSC tribal project to the U-Rock tribe, the Arcata 30th Street Commons project. In addition, our climate change research program conducted intentional outreach to tribes, and the council approved 2 climate change research program awards that incorporate tribal partners. And lastly, what you'll hear about later on today is that the council will be asked to approve the technical assistance guidelines with a separate set of guidance on tribal technical assistance. Next slide, please. Last but not least, our third example is focused on technical assistance. Our technical assistance principles have an intentional focus on equity, a commitment to engaging diverse voices, a focus on hiring staff and consultants with racial equity competencies, and we hope that this is all applied to our work conducting listening tours, technical assistance, capacity building, and interagency coordination. Next slide, please. These beautiful faces that you see here are the faces of 2 of our new equity-focused programs that are focused on providing state employees and underserved communities with technical assistance, capacity building, and interagency coordination services. The Community Assistance for Climate Equity program, which you'll hear more about, and I often call CASE, is focused on supporting technical assistance and capacity building efforts across state agencies and departments, as well as with local entities and at the community level. CASE's work is guided by the understanding that in order to ensure equitable outcomes across California's communities, the most under-resourced communities require greater upstream support. Our second program is the Health and Equity program, which you've heard a little bit about too. That program is focused on supporting the Health and All Policies Task Force, integrating health and equity across state programs and departments, coordinating the implementation of SGC's Racial Equity Action Plan, and supporting the Capital Collaborative on Race and Equity. Both programs are eager to partner with council members and your respective organizations to increase the integration of racial equity into your programs, policies, and operations. So we're here to be thought partners for you. One way we're doing this is through the Capital Collaborative on Race and Equity, which my colleague Holly Nickel will tell us more about. Next slide.
Thanks so much, Jesse, and good afternoon to council members and Madam Chair. Thank you for having me here today to talk about the Capital Collaborative on Race and Equity. I'm Holly Nickel. I am a racial equity strategist with the Public Health Institute and also a co-lead of the Capital Collaborative on Race and Equity, which we call CORE for short, like Apple Core or Earth Core. Just so you can remember the acronym. This initiative is offered through a public-private partnership between the Strategic Growth Council and the Public Health Institute. And as a few of you have said today, CORE is a learning community of California state government entities that create plans for and advance racial equity approaches in state government, especially focusing on institutional level changes within culture, policies, and procedures. This work is more than just workforce equity, but it also means bringing an anti-racism lens to budgeting and programs and grant allocations, community engagement, etc. The initiative consists of a few components. There's a training component, a technical assistance component, and then also a component where we engage executives and also support enterprise-wide initiatives as well. CORE is the biggest initiative of its kind. And since the launch in 2018, it's just grown exponentially. And so we're not just building the capacity of singular departments to take on racial equity, but we're really creating a movement inside state government to advance racial equity together. Next slide, please. And core participants are not only part of a state movement, but they're part of a national movement of local, regional, and other jurisdictions that are coordinated by the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, or GARE, which many of you have probably heard of. And GARE is convened by our training partners, Race Board, who's a national racial justice nonprofit. And so you may not be able to see all the names of the jurisdictions shown on the map, but I really just wanted to give you a sense of the spread of this work across the nation that we're part of. And as you can see, there are many jurisdictions in California that are leading the way, and also on the West Coast in Washington and Oregon, but then all the way across into the Midwest and to the East Coast as well. And all of us are part of this national GARE network, and we use the same sort of organizational change model. And so what you get is a very consistent, coordinated, organized movement for racial justice across the nation. Next slide. And so in our core work, I am reacquainting you to our alumni, those who have already been through a learning year and then have participated in an implementation year and are moving on to their third year of advanced implementation. And so there are about 13 organizations that took part over 2018 and 2019. And that covers about 18 or so units of government. And they took the plunge to really learn about normalizing race and racism and learning about government's role in undoing that. And then these departments in their first year created a racial equity action plan and are implementing that right now. And what we've really seen and what really surprised me about this cohort, and I'm excited for it in the next cohort, is that we've really seen a cross-pollination of ideas of departments, across departments coordinating work, sharing materials and resources across departments to save time and energy. And we've also seen the cross-pollination of people. And so as participants, individual participants have gotten really great at understanding racial equity and our roles in government, as they move around horizontally and vertically in their jobs within government, they take that knowledge with them. They take that passion with them. And so we're just really happy the way that it's spreading. And we're seeing concrete changes also in the ways that departments are carrying out their work. So as Jesse kind of mentioned, the grant programs, the hiring, and how priorities are shifting to be more focused on equity. And a panel of our alumni will speak to this in a few minutes. Next slide, please. And so these are the new organizations, the awesome organizations that just participated in our kickoff of the learning cohort, which will span 15 months from 2020 to 2021. At the end of this cohort season, they will also have racial equity action plans that they will need to move into implementation with. 15 teams, about 200 more state employees that are building capacity in this racial equity space. And we've already seen, even in the first session, an extreme hunger and passion to make government more equitable. So we're really happy about that. And so if you look at both of these lists, you can see that many of the departments are under your umbrellas of responsibility. And so I want to give a huge kudos to those departments, but then also you as their leaders. And with the capacity that we're building in these departments, we'll see in subsequent years the need to coordinate momentum and movement of these participants to work together to inform the entire enterprise. So we're really excited about that. And this is one of the places where you as council members can lead your organizations forward. Next slide, please. And speaking of enterprise-wide, SGC and PHI partner very closely to elevate the expertise of the core cohort across government and support enterprise-wide initiatives. This includes partnership with the Surgeon General's office and with the HIAP task force as well. We quickly planned and helped staff a COVID and equity rapid response meeting for all departments. And then last but not least, just this example, we've contributed to the governor's California Leads as an Employer task forces and their subgroups. Before COVID hit, Arena Ortega, director of CalHR, met with our core alumni and laid out and asked for them to submit recommendations that would later inform, their recommendations to these task forces. And we submitted 160 recommendations that were pulled from work plans and other work that has been going on in CORE. We're super excited about the opportunities that lie ahead to draw upon, this experience and this expertise and to do more enterprise-wide collaboration work. And we look forward to also hearing ideas from the council on what that would look like. So I appreciate your time again, and Jesse, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you, Holly. I love the energy and the momentum. It's so exciting. It's like having a new freshman class coming in, right? These are like lifelong bonds
Totally.
everyone's gonna develop. So I will say let's hear from a previous class of CORE participants. We have a very esteemed panel of racial equity champions. If you can go to the next slide, Fabiha, and the next slide after that. Great, these are the lovely faces, but we also have them here in person. Yana Garcia, Deputy Secretary for Environmental Justice, Tribal Affairs and Border Relations at the California Environmental Protection Agency. We have now Jeannie Ward-Waller, who's Deputy Director of the Planning and Modal Programs, but stepping in for Rihanna Gordon, who's the Racial Equity Program Manager at the California Department of Transportation. And we have Lázaro Cárdenas, who's our Racial Equity Specialist at the California Department of Public Health. And so we are going to actually get off of the slide deck so that we can see their lovely faces and have the public be able to see the lovely faces of everyone. Fantastic, they're here. And we're just going to start with a brief 3-minute introduction from each of you. And so we can start with Lázaro from CDPH.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me, Jesse?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Lázaro Cárdenas. I also go by Lazaro. I'm the Racial Equity Specialist in the Office of Health Equity at the California Department of Public Health. I specifically lead and coordinate the department's Racial and Health Equity Initiative and coordinating the action plan for that initiative. I was previously at California EPA's Department of Toxic Substance Control doing environmental justice and community engagement work there for several years. So I have a lot of love for my Enviros and EJ folks. But happy to be here, a part of this panel today.
Great. Can we hear from Caltrans?
Hello, good afternoon. Sorry to be standing in for my colleague Rihanna. I'm not as exciting of a substitute, but she got pulled into something. So really excited to be here with you, Council. I'm Jeannie Ward-Waller. My title is Deputy Director of Planning and Modal Programs at Caltrans. I will explain how that is relevant to our equity work once we get to discussion. But super excited that you're having this panel today and that we're going to discuss all the great work we're doing and how we can work together better under the SGC umbrella.
Great, and Yana from EPA.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Yana Garcia. I'm a Deputy Secretary for Environmental Justice, Tribal Affairs, and California-Mexico Border Relations at Cal EPA. Really excited to be here with you all, excited to share a little bit, not just about our work, but about the real leadership that the Strategic Growth Council has taken with so many other agencies across the administration in undertaking this racial equity work over the past several years. At Cal EPA, we are in our 3rd year, and I'd say our most exciting year in engaging in this racial equity work, and that's for a variety of reasons. I think, first and foremost, the moment that we're in with respect to both the crises that we're facing and the opportunity to really change the ways in which socioeconomic and racial disparities in particular are manifesting themselves across our society writ large. So really excited to be a part of this discussion and a part of this work, and thanks for having me.
Great. So I'm actually going to start by just asking 2 questions, mostly to just warm up the crowd, but we're really going to turn it over to Chair Gordon and obviously our council members to have more of a back and forth discussion. So my first question to you guys is, could you please tell us some best practices related to developing a racial action plan within your department or agency? And I will then ask you guys to weigh in the following order: EPA, Caltrans, and CDPH. So Yana.
Sure, thank you for the question. So best practices in developing the plan, we had the benefit, as I mentioned, this is our 3rd year really participating in this sort of deep racial equity work. And we had the benefit of being a member of the Government Alliance for Racial Equity, which I think was really key to laying a foundation for some pretty baseline tools to think about racial equity and to apply as we're developing plans. One of them is really to normalize racial equity, to normalize conversations around racial equity. And I think in order to do that, you really have to have a sort of foundation of folks who are on the same page about what it is we mean when we're talking about racial equity, that are on the same page in terms of their level of comfort with talking about race. And so one of the things that I think is key at the outset of developing any racial equity plan is to have a sort of meeting of the minds amongst key leadership, key executive leadership, an executive sponsor team. I actually served as the executive sponsor for the initial phases of our racial equity work. And I have to say, you know, building high-level leadership for this type of work has been challenging. And I think it makes all the difference in the world to have leaders at the highest levels express their commitment to racial equity and to talk about race and start normalizing those conversations. We've been lucky to have that at Cal EPA, and it's made a world of difference. And I think it's really critical to developing the rapport that you need in order to look at racial equity issues across any agency. The second, I think, best practice is to uplift the leadership and visioning that comes from communities of color, and these can be represented even in your own staff. At Cal EPA, you know, we're very familiar with concepts around environmental justice, and it's part of my day-to-day work to engage in environmental justice work, which at its core is racial equity work. We've had a lot of movement building from environmental justice stakeholders across our state that's really pushed us towards recognizing racial equity as it manifests itself in various aspects of our work. And so I think referring back to so much of the groundwork that's already been laid for this, so much of the leadership that comes from communities of color that have been putting these issues before us for a really long time, as we embark on establishing these racial equity plans, is really critical to addressing some of the power dynamics that underlie racial inequities and racial disparities in the first place. For internal staff as well, I think we see a lot of examples of staff across various agencies for whom racial equity is not new, for whom concepts of dealing with diversity and inclusion and equitable opportunities across state government is not new. And there have been a lot of ideas that have circulated among staff who have been engaged in this work over time. And so I think similarly, turning within your own agency and thinking about whether there might be leaders or champions that have been working on these issues over time, or folks whose ideas might really be able to inform the groundwork of your racial equity plan at the outset would also be really key. Finally, I'll just say working with other agencies in developing the racial equity action plans. I think that's probably something that we'll all touch upon. But one of the other benefits of being a part of the Government Alliance for Racial Equity Network is being able to leverage the examples of agencies at various levels of government, at the municipal level, at regional, state, and federal levels of government, who have been thinking about these issues from the government standpoint, from the standpoint of folks who have authority and influence over so many of our institutions. And so really leveraging that partnership, because none of us can really do this alone. For us at the state level, you know, through the capital cohort, through C-Corps, we've been able to leverage that across California state government. And that's also been a big benefit to developing some of our racial equity action plans and implementing them.
Great, thank you so much, Yana. And so we'd love to hear from Jeannie, if you want to provide an update about the work that you're doing and also your experience developing the Racial Equity Action Plan.
Sure. Well, I just want to second everything that Yana said, because I think that the point about normalizing conversations and also getting really strong executive buy-in are critical and have been really critical to us as well. I think even, you know, speaking from an even larger agency's perspective, having your whole exec team be able to talk about this stuff, be able to be comfortable talking about it is a huge amount of work. And so, you know, really having buy-in, having champions, and making the time to spend really talking about the histories of your agencies, what that means for communities, how that has resulted in these disparities, and then what are you going to do about it? I think normalizing those conversations are so important. So I just want to really second that. I'm excited to say that we, Caltrans, I think you all know us well, know what we do. We are having some really meaningful conversations within our executive team about the history of the transportation system and how it's developed, and how that impacts on the work that we do today, the transportation access and burden that falls on communities of color and low-income communities, and that is really meaningful. And I think that has pushed us forward. We've really got a huge amount of momentum right now, which is incredibly exciting, partly thanks to the leadership of our current director, Tokso Mashakin. So I want to give some credit to him. He's been a very vocal champion, and he is pushing us really hard right now. So it's exciting for somebody like me who participated in the GARE cohort for the last 2 years, who really, you know, is incredibly passionate about this issue, to have the leadership support within our agency, really across our exec team now that's pushing, you know, we've got a huge amount of momentum. So I think the only thing I want to add in terms of kind of best practices, and this speaks a little bit to new teams diving into the GARE work also, is resources. And I put that, like, you know, in all caps, be ready to commit the resources to doing this work. And I think that goes for creating your racial equity action plan, for making those actions meaningful, for making sure they're data driven, that you're ready to go out and talk to communities about them, takes a huge amount of resources. So we started this work without really dedicated staff that were, you know, full-time focused on racial equity. And within a year, we said, oh my gosh, we're not even going to get a plan done without having at least a full-time person that's responsible for shepherding this plan over the finish line. So in 2019, we did create a racial equity program manager, one full-time person in an agency of 20,000. So still a huge task. And then at the end of 2019, we did actually get our racial equity action plan adopted. So I think that was testament to a lot of conversations at our executive board, a lot of presentations. You know, we even brought Race Forward in to talk to our exec team. So again, reiterate the importance of that executive level communication and buy-in. And then I'm very pleased to let you know that, you know, just a week or two ago, we announced the creation of a whole office focused on race and equity. So now we've got 10 full-time folks focused on race and equity within our organization, which I think, again, you know, an agency of 20,000, it's still a big task. So I just want to really underscore the point about being prepared to put resources seriously behind this work, because just training a large agency is, you know, a really big job. And then when you talk about going out into the communities, which Yana talked about, you know, we're kind of at a point now where we've done enough internal homework. We're ready to go out and start working more with communities and talking to them about it. But you don't want to send your staff out there without having them trained and really understanding these issues and how to talk about it. So I could keep going. I'll stop there. I think those are some key points I wanted to highlight. Jesse. That's great. Thank you, Jeannie. You were a great replacement for Rihanna. Lázaro? From
yes,
CDPA.
yes, thank you, Jesse. You know, I'll just echo again in terms of your developing an action plan and doing this work in general. Really, the tone and the visibility of leadership, taking ownership on something like this is so key. And that's throughout the organization, from your frontline supervisors to the highest levels of the department and agency. I think that carries a lot of weight and builds morale and keeps this difficult work moving forward and really inspires passion among staff. In terms of kind of where we are at with CDPH, CDPH has been a member of GARE, the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, since 2016. And I can't reiterate how incredible being a part of the network is and having CORE bring that network into the state capitol and state agencies. We're talking about local health departments and libraries and county supervisors from across the country who are doing this work. And so we are part of a movement here in California that is national. So I just want to highlight that. And it's been one of the most incredible pleasures of my experience doing racial equity. At CDPH, we are focused on health and health outcomes. And so our work is focused on reducing and eliminating racial and ethnic health inequities and health outcomes, and also advancing racial equity in our programs and services. And over the past several years, we have been focused on workforce equity, education and training, and strategic communications. And a few of the things that we've actually completed recently, we've actually in April launched our Racial and Health Equity Glossary of Terms. And this is a glossary that is a very important tool for our workforce, and that helps develop, as Jana had mentioned earlier, kind of a common language to help understand and discuss key racial and health equity concepts. And really, by having some shared definitions or close to shared definitions, we can avoid confusion, misunderstandings, and a lot of frustrations that come up in having conversations around race. And so this glossary includes things like allyship, like cultural appropriation, assimilation, racial equity, equity and equality, right? So some fundamental concepts that we need to come together and talk about in delving into this work. Another really awesome activity and deliverable we've been working on this year and we'll be moving forward in the future is our Can We Chat series. Can We Chat series is a conversations on race and racism that is open to all CDPH staff. And it's an opportunity for staff to have twice a month, sit down, have discussions that are facilitated by some contractors to build a collective understanding of issues related to race and racism, develop some peer-to-peer support and collaborative problem solving, and just kind of like build this and materialize an inclusive workplace culture, right? And so these sessions are offered twice a month, coordinated out of the Office of Health Equity, but we do contract with some local consultants. And this is really exciting work that we've been bringing staff together from every single program at CDPH to come and have these conversations. And we're happy to say that we plan to continue these sessions into 2021 and 2022. Yeah, and I think, as you're developing the plan, know that this is going to take resources sooner rather than later. The resources to develop this Can We Chat, came forth. And my position, actually, I was hired on last September, so just about a year now, to help coordinate this work. So it is important to anticipate and plan for the resources to create a sustainable program and move forward your initiative and your plan.
Great. So I actually am really excited. We are going to pivot now back to Chair Gordon, who's going to facilitate additional questions, and also want to make myself available to answer any questions, as well as Holly Nickel, who can also speak to the Capitol Collaborative on Race and Equity.
Thank you so much, Jesse and Holly and Lazaro and Jana and Jeannie, all of you for your amazing just weighing in on your experiences and the importance of this program. I would love to open it up for council members if you have a question. I should note that Darwin Wasabi, who's Deputy Secretary at CalSTA, is now sitting in for Secretary Kim as his alternate. And with that, if you have a question for anybody, the panelists, Holly or Jesse, please raise your hand, or in the case of those who can't, wave at me so I can see you. Karen Ross, Secretary Ross.
Okay, so I'm going to ask some real fundamental questions. We're very excited to do this work. But it sounds like the most important thing is to take the time for the internal processes so that every employee can be a part of this before you do a lot of external stakeholder engagement. Or is that different across agencies, the processes that you go through to really move this forward?
You know, I think Jeannie has a great story to tell, so.
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on that. I'd love to hear Jana's answer to that question too. For Caltrans, the racial equity is kind of a new issue.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say new because that sounds like, we've been ignoring disparities, but, our role has historically been, building the state highway system. And, we have the environmental process, but, we're focused on those big projects. So I think to really embrace and more proactively engage with communities differently around our plans and our projects was kind of new for our agency. So because of that, we felt there was a lot of need to do more homework internally. And that's why our initial focus has been very much on that executive level, those executive level conversations, and then also training our staff. But I think for other agencies, CDPH certainly, I think EPA agencies that have, really their focus is health, equity, environmental justice. There's probably a different approach. I think there's more structures already within those agencies that are oriented towards this work. So it's kind of a more natural. So we are, I would say we're in the early stages of really engaging externally very deeply on racial equity specifically.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Secretary Ross, that's a really good question. I think there's such a balance to be stricken between the need to really state affirmatively that this is something that has leadership commitment and that you're committed to act with urgency on these issues, and also provide the time and space to build your internal capacity to do that genuinely and meaningfully over time. Racial inequities didn't begin in June of this year. They won't be solved in a matter of months. But I do think it's really important, and this is something that we're in the throes of trying to navigate really at Cal EPA. I think it's really important to set out, short-term as well as long-term goals and metrics, and really hold ourselves accountable to meeting some of those, and to be consistent in our messaging to our staff that this is something that we believe in, this is something that we're committed to, and it's something that needs to be integrated into all that we do. And so really putting out the directive to managers, to deputies, that this is something that is on all of us to identify opportunities to push forward and to report back. And I think spaces like this that also hold us accountable to the public are really important for reporting and for getting feedback from public stakeholders. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Just in case that last point wasn't clear, just opportunities like this where we can make public our commitments and also take input from the public on what some priority areas are, what some gaps might be in how we're seeing things are really critical.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question, Secretary Ross. I have Deputy Secretary Amanda Hansen.
Hi. Well, I'm really sorry that Wade isn't here to join because he's really passionate about these issues, and bringing on a new member of our executive team at the Resources Agency whose entire portfolio will be focused on equity. So I am scribbling down notes for that person when they get here, and just wanted to express my appreciation for a lot of the insights that you've shared. Really helpful and a lot of good work to build on. I did just want to ask, I think sort of like Caltrans and maybe health, we have a very large and distributed organization. And so I'm just curious, you've identified a couple of tools that you've developed to sort of overcome that. I don't want to say it's a challenge because it's also an opportunity, but that characteristic. And I'm just curious if there's anything else you might want to share about, how you've, driven home that this is critical and gotten folks in such a large organization sort of all singing from the same hymn book. Thanks.
Well, I'll start. Lazaro, I want to hear your answer to this question too. So in our first GARE learning year, we only had headquarters folks participating on the team, partly because the sessions were all day in Sacramento and it was a huge expense to have people traveling from all over the state. But we quickly realized that it's critical to have folks from all of our district offices participating and engaged. And so the second year, we actually diversified our team quite a bit and brought in a number of district staff. And I would say, I don't think we've solved this one because it really is one of our key challenges, but we have conversations constantly with the districts about this. Rihanna has given, I don't know how many dozens, I don't want to say hundreds yet, but she's given so many presentations, which is a little easier now with all the meetings being virtual. But yeah, it's just she's sort of constantly in demand to talk about equity. What is equity about? Why is it relevant to our work? What does the transportation data say? You know, just introductory, again, normalizing the issue, normalizing the conversation. I think that's the way you start. Ultimately, our goal is to develop an entire training curriculum internal to Caltrans. We're going to build off a lot of the work that other agencies have done already, and a lot of the local jurisdictions that have been in GARE for a while also have developed really robust training. So I think there's a lot of resources we can draw from on the training side, but you know, we're going to have some training that's specific to engineers, specific to planners, specific to environmental planners. You know, there's like each classification almost kind of needs to be trained, and how does this apply to the specifics of your job? So that's kind of the vision of where we're going to reach everyone and to make sure they understand the issue. But I think it starts with, again, just talking about it, just getting people comfortable, you know, even paying attention to the issue and understanding it. So that's kind of what I would say. The other thing I just want to say while I have the floor, that is a key, I think, to long-term success that we're doing now is embedding equity into our strategic management plan. And we've been having those conversations over about the last year. And we're really, you know, we have a specific equity goal, equity value, and then we're trying to also have performance objectives across all of our goals that speak to equity. So that is, I think, part of really institutionalizing it long-term for a big agency. So.
Yeah, I'll also weigh in on that. I think that, you know, you have to, there's so many different audiences in a large state agency. There are different levels of organizations, frontline supervisors, directors and assistant directors, and you have differentiation between programs. And so I think it's really important to present this information to multiple audiences. So something, you know, I mentioned before, the Can We Chat, right? That's a broader kind of setting and forum where anyone and everyone from the organization can participate in, right? Doesn't matter if you're, especially now we're doing it through Zoom, where in the state you're from, where you're located, you can participate. It doesn't matter if you're a supervisor or a deputy, everyone is here to come and join. We're all colleagues in this. At the same time, you also want to be targeted. And so we are, for instance, one of the things that we've partnered with our training office is we've developed a portion on workforce equity into the 80-hour supervisor development program. That's a mandatory CalHR training. And so we're building upon kind of that general curriculum and providing a small portion about what we mean and what we talk about in terms of workforce equity and the lived experiences of staff of color in the workplace. And so we're going to continue to also develop an entire training curriculum, multi-hour training curriculum for supervisors specifically. But we're also engaging our senior leadership on a regular basis. And so it's important to invest and communicate and drive the message home in different parts of your organization. And one thing I think that ties into some other areas, and you'll notice that the three panels here, we are in the equity, health equity, or EJ kind of sphere, right? And I think what's really important to be successful is bringing in your partners and other kind of core programs that may not necessarily see themselves in the role of equity based off of their actual functions, like your EEO offices, right? Which is, you know, kind of a federal compliance mechanism, your HR folks, your legal folks. Those folks are important to bring on early into the conversation and help educate and inform and see where they're at.
Thanks, both of you. Great answers and a really good question. I have Deputy Secretary Darwin Musadi, and then Secretary Blumenfeld, you're next.
Great, thank you so much for both the great work you're all doing, but also for this really informative conversation. I'm really glad that the SGC is hosting this and creating this space for this discussion. My question kind of along those lines is, I know the SGC is doing a lot of work to support all of you through efforts around GARE and now the core cohort this year, as well as adopting a resolution to support the creation of action plans across all of our agencies. But I'm curious, from your perspectives of folks doing this work, what do you see as potential additional roles or opportunities that SGC, either the council or staff, could help fill to support the work that you all are doing?
And I'll just add that this is such an exciting and fantastic question, and we're probably just going to have time for one person to answer from our distinguished panel. But please, whoever that person is, jump on in.
Like it was Yana, but who jumped in first?
I wanted to see if Laz might have something. Do you have something, Laz? Okay, I'll go. I think that finding opportunities where leadership from multiple agencies are coming together in this way are really key to deal with kind of like the tougher nuts to crack in many respects. So we often have staff, and this goes a little bit to Amanda's question a bit in terms of how you deal with diffuse agency structures. And in so many instances, we have staff at various levels hearing about racial disparities and inequities and challenges that don't necessarily fit neatly within whatever purview or jurisdiction they have. And while I think there are opportunities to use those instances for educational purposes and to think about what component of that actually does fit within our jurisdiction and our control and has to do with our day-to-day work, I also think that there are some challenges that we really have to work very collaboratively on and across leadership levels. So if the council, if we had even just very basic consistent reporting on racial equity findings and issues to the council, whether those come up in the context of, in our case, transportation challenges, housing, climate adaptation and resilience, which we know there are many examples in any of those contexts, and really, really rely on the leadership represented among the council members here to not only brainstorm solutions, but really go back to their agencies and think about what resources we can dedicate to building these solutions over time, and then have that sort of like feedback loop so that we're really using this council to think about the issues that we're all getting at the agency level that we may not have the resources on our own to address or deal with, and that we really need some strategic partnership to dismantle and to address over time. Does that answer your question, Darwin?
It does, thank you. I know we're low on time, but I see Jeannie also unmuted. Are you trying to also answer the question?
I just, if it's okay, really quick, Jesse, I just want to chime in on this one because Darwin and I had a chance to talk earlier, and I wanted to follow up specifically on this. There are so many issues right now that are so urgent and intersectional. And so I also think there's a role for the council in uplifting some of those policy issues, like housing and transportation, which I talk to Kate Gordon about all the time, and how it affects low-income people. And then we've got COVID, and public transit is in terrible straits right now. There are issues that affect all of our agencies, but that we need to work on together, and are really equity issues. And so I think I would love the council to be a forum for some of those policy discussions that That's what sorry, that's all.
That was a great addition. I'm going to go to Secretary Blumenfeld, and then I think we're going to wrap up this conversation, which is too bad because it could really go on for the rest of the day. But Secretary Blumenfeld.
First of all, Kate and Louise and Jessica and Lazaro, Jeannie, Yana, thank you for having this discussion. Really important to have it. And I actually want to pick up on what Jeannie was saying, which is something I was thinking, and she vocalized, which is really making this more formalized function of SGC. I think part of what we're all struggling with is that in order to tackle the systemic racism within our organizations, it can't be an afterthought. It has to be front and center of what we do. And in order to make it front and center, it has to be agendized. It has to come from the top and the bottom, from all directions. I think Yana and I having someone like Yana in every agency, and Jeannie and Lazaro and all the folks, and I think Wade's commitment that he started off with the notice of, having someone that's specifically focused on tribal and EJ issues, like there is nothing that replaces that. So institutionally, as we think about the very few BCPs, in our organizations, in our agencies, making sure that, within the 240,000 person organization that is the state of California, to Jeannie's point, this is the one place where you have the most, cohesive representation of that. Like, how are we going to tackle this in a comprehensive way where there's accountability and metrics in the same way that we would VMT or the same way that we would housing equity? So to me, I think this resolution is an incredibly important step. I think what Yana and I notice is that, and she can speak to this if we have time, or we can talk about it hopefully at a next scheduled meeting of the SGC where we get to talk about it. But I mean, this takes daily focus on the people who work in all our organizations, and this is seen as, part of the promise of California is that we are ahead of much of the nation. But on this issue, we still have so much work to do that we really can't rest on our laurels of thinking how progressive and great we are. And I think a lot of people, especially in state government, feel like this is somewhere else's problem. Somewhere else, this is a problem in Wisconsin today, or it's a problem, in Portland tomorrow. But it really is something that I think we need to continue to prioritize. And I guess in the interest of time, I would second what Jeannie said. I think we need a single place, and until there's a different or a better place, Kate, I'd recommend that we really think about how to institutionalize it here and take this as part of our mandate, and even think about how it changes our mission statement. Like this, we are an interagency coordination body. We have very senior leadership. We have incredible people that work for you at SGC and for all of us. And we should just make a statement in addition to the principles that are later on the agenda to make this part of what we do.
Thank you, Secretary Blumenfeld. I think that's a really important point, and one that we've obviously talked with SGC staff a fair amount about as well. And I think the resolution will be the beginning of that conversation, but I want to really flag that you've just brought up sort of going the next step beyond that and really talking about operationalizing this through SGC, which I think we should talk about. I have he has promised to be a very short question from Secretary Crowfoot. And then I will just give people a heads up that we are going to take a very short break before the resolution and the public comment. I know we have a number of public comments on this item. So we will, after Secretary Crowfoot's question and any answers, we will take a short break. It is really important that folks return after that short break in a timely manner, or we will not have a quorum for the resolution. So I'll say this again after we hear from Secretary Crowfoot, but I'm just giving you a heads up. Go ahead, Wade.
Thanks. Well, I'm really excited with the notion of SGC digging deep on this and prioritizing it, and supportive if it needs to shift our agenda or even our mission. And our resources agency, we are also quite lucky to be hiring this fall an assistant secretary for equity and inclusion, in addition to the tribal affairs. So we're really looking to leaders like Cal EPA that have had a program for almost a decade or more. But question, Yana, Jeannie, Lazaro, are you all sort of an informal network of leaders within state agencies on this? And it seems like you talk and collaborate, or is there something more institutionalized that allow you to kind of exchange strategies and information?
And Council Member Crawford, we might also want to weigh in on Holly Nickel from the Public Health Institute, because she's helped support and kind of build the glue amongst all of us. I think she's on.
Yeah. Hi. I am having trouble getting my video, I think, started back up. But CORE serves as kind of a hub for the executive sponsors. So each team, each department team has executive sponsors, either one or two, and has team coordinators like Lazaro. And, Jeannie was an executive sponsor, Yana was an executive sponsor. And so we serve as that hub to connect everyone together. And so when there are questions from one department, we connect them with the other. And if the topmost leader, the executive has some questions and needs some coordinating, we connect those together. And so, yeah, there's definitely a hub. It's maybe not as formalized as we might like, but I think that's part of what's going to be decided moving forward, right? Is how do we institutionalize this even more? So very exciting and good thought.
Thanks, Holly.
And that might even go, Secretary Blumenfeld, in some ways to your question. I mean, really thinking through how can SGC's key staff, which already has so many champions on it and so many of these agencies, maybe serve as a place or have an adjunct equity sort of component to serve as a place for that kind of ongoing conversation. And I think particularly one of the things that you've all raised, which is how do we operationalize equity into our programs and policies as well as into our institutions. That seems like a very clear SGC sort of function, and one that I'd be really interested in continuing to talk about as well. And how can we kind of make that more formal? All right, I think that was great. Jesse, any wrap up, or anyone, any wrap up comments or points here? You guys are amazing. Thank you for all of the hard work. Just as a reminder, we do still have a vote. We have a couple things. We have public comment on this item. We have a vote on this item. We have been here for a couple hours, and also I at least have a very quick thing I have to do to speak on a webinar that's actually about adverse childhood experiences through our precision medicine program, but I'll come right back. So we're going to take a break. It's 3:02 right now. We're going to take a break just till 3:10. So if folks could be back on time, we will start up again once we have a quorum when you come back. Thank you, everybody. Back at 3:10. See you then. Okay, let's see who's back. Do we have, oh, look at you guys are so good. You probably didn't even leave. You just got on your email. Nicely done. Do we have a quorum? 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't think we don't yet have a quorum. And tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm missing somebody. Secretary Blumenfeld, are you back or are you still out? I see his name. I'm going to give another minute to folks. We need 2 more. Secretary Ross, thank you. 1 more and we can start up again. And
I think you're there, Chair Gordon.
I'm here. Are we there? Do we have 6? Oh, good. Julie's back. Perfect. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for letting me do that. That is an important council. It's a council that we bring together with the Surgeon General for a precision medicine program, and they are putting out grant money for adverse childhood experiences, including some of the experiences folks are having around the state right now when it comes to the pandemic, fires, air quality, pollution. So it's very related to the work we're doing, but I just wanted to recognize them and give them a second of my time. So thank you. Hope the break was actually good for folks and you got a minute to get out of your chairs also. All right, go back to our agenda, and where we are now is back to Jesse to introduce the resolution.
Great, and so my colleague Pabika will put the resolution language back up. Perfect. So our resolution actions, for those of you who are tuning in, are focused on the council and each member agency committing to integrating racial equity into council leadership, operations, programs, policies, and practices. The council and each member agency committing to identifying and implementing concrete and measurable actions to achieve racial equity and to report on the progress of the council as a whole, as well as that of each member agency. The council and each member agency commit to working with state boards, departments, and offices to align and advance the council's commitment to racial equity. And the council commits to using public council meetings as a forum to share racial equity actions, milestones, and best practices, and to actively engage communities and stakeholders to gather public input on the topics. Next slide, please. So our staff recommendation is to adopt the California Strategic Growth Council's racial equity resolution. And to facilitate the vote, we will actually go back to the resolution action language so that you have that in front of you.
Perfect. Can I ask if there are any clarifying questions from council members? And I'll ask that, and then I will call for public comment right after that. So any clarifying questions on the resolution from council members before we go to public comment? Hold on. Oh, I do have one. Secretary Blumenfeld.
I guess the only question based on the last conversation we had with Jeannie, and this is just to Jesse and Luis and you mainly, is on 4. Is there anything that we could make it seem a little more regular? Like this is a little soft around it. Could happen once every 2 years. It could happen like just some way of making sure that this is I don't know what the best language is, frequent, regular.
We could, sorry, this is Louise. We could certainly add in regular. We also do have our commitment on the our racial equity action plan to do it at least once a year. But I think if we want to have more of the discussion like we just had, which is so rich, we might want to think about an increased frequency from that.
Or we
I just want
could go ahead. I'm sorry.
I guess Kate, the only goal would be, I just don't want a year to pass and us to feel good about it. And then like we read it and it's like, yeah, we are doing it. We don't want, like, I think it has to be, I don't want to be so prescriptive that that it doesn't work, but I don't want it to be, feels a little too loose so that we're not actually making sure we're tracking it. So
would it make sense to, just given what Louise just said about the existing commitment to do an annual update, would it make sense to make clear in here that that there will be at least one council meeting a year where there'll be a kind of an in-depth conversation about racial equity actions, milestones, best practices? Or do you want it to be more than that? I mean, obviously it should be more than that, but I'm just wondering if we want to put a time commitment in there that's consistent with the other commitment we've made.
I mean, just remind me, how many meetings do we have a year?
That's what I was going to ask.
4.
So I would say the council commits to using 2 public council meetings each year as a forum to share.
There we have 6.
6.
Okay, good.
I lied.
So 2 would be fine then.
Yeah.
At least 2.
At least
Council
2.
member commits
I
to
would say at
using
least 2.
a minimum of 2 public council meetings per year as a forum.
Are other council members, anybody object to that as an amendment to number 4 here? Or have alternative language? All right, so hearing no objection, when that's the friendly amendment for this recommendation. So when we vote on it, we will vote on it with that amendment. Any other comments? Thank you, Jared. Any other comments from council members on clarifying questions or potential amendments, or just comments from council members?
Chairwoman.
Yes, now I see you. Yes, sorry, I'm trying to manage all kinds of screens at the same time. Go ahead.
I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand electronically. Thank you for acknowledging. I had also a recommendation or a proposal here, and it goes back to the racial equity action plan that was presented by Jessica with very thorough, great example of how to keep track of the work. And I'm wondering if, as you know, as we further our commitment as council members representing, agencies and departments, if we should also establish a goal for ourselves that each of us will have either establish an equity action plan or or strategic equity plan within our agencies, and I think that being able to get to that that point of all agencies having something concrete in place that they're also measuring and tracking and sharing ensures that it's institutionalized, right? It's it's embedded in the work that we're doing. And I don't know if it necessarily belongs in the resolution, or if it's more of a recommendation for staff to take back to look at the racial equity action plan and to add it as a objective or goal within the plan.
Okay.
I can speak to that. We can definitely make sure to include it and ensure that we're tracking that each of our council member agencies are making progress around developing a racial equity action plan within the SGC racial equity action plan. And then an outcome of the participation in CORE is the development of a racial equity action plan. And so I think participation through CORE could yield that outcome. But if you wanted stronger language, it could be in section 2 that the council and each member agency commit to developing a racial equity action plan, identifying and implementing concrete and measurable actions to achieve racial equity, and to report on the progress of the council as a whole.
Just being on the practical side, and because I'm always scarred with my rejections of all my great BCPs, I'm mindful of the resources, and so I do want to give ourselves some space. It's not for lack of commitment, but it might not happen as fast for some as it would for others who might have some discretionary funding on it. So I'm just being very practical there, but I definitely agree with the commitment to do so.
I think I'm interested in others' thoughts. Secretary Castro Ramirez, I feel like number 2 here, listening to your comment and Secretary Ross's comment, it is a strong commitment to concrete action. And I wonder if maybe that concrete action is a specific plan within a specific amount of time for some agencies, and for some it's kind of just a report out. I don't know if folks, where are others on adding in, or where are you, Secretary Castro Ramirez, since you brought this up, on sort of adding this in as a specific commitment to the resolution versus kind of thinking, encouraging our staff and SGC to make it part of implementation of the resolution?
Right.
Just where you are.
Yes, thank you. So we are early on in the process. We're starting. We have some departments like HCD that are much further ahead, and it's it's clear when a department is has embraced and has made this a priority. It shows in the work and in the effort. So as we have been developing the affordable housing advanced planning efforts, everything that we're doing is with an equity lens across the board, right? But that's not consistent across all departments within agency. And I have to just again thank SGC and all of the panel members today, because I think you all shared some just very important information and recommendations for us as we think about the commitment and the consistency and ensuring that we have that this is something that we're committed to for the long haul. It's not enough to just have a few members of the leadership involved. Everyone needs to be involved, and we do need to have dedicated resources. Yeah. So it probably will take a little longer for BCSH, to get there. We have 11 different departments, and to get all 11 different departments to that point. So back to the question and maybe the recommendation, I'm comfortable with leaving the language as it's currently written under number 2, but it might be helpful under the action plan for us to track that, to be able to report back on our progress, to be able to hold each other accountable, and then also to be able to ask for assistance where we may need, for some support from others. So I'm comfortable just leaving the language as has been presented in the resolution, and adding a component within the actual action plan that we review as a council once a year.
Perfect, thank you. So really, just I think it's clear to everybody, but just really a strong recommendation to staff while implementing the resolution, assuming it passes, that the kind of progress toward a racial equity action plan is a component of all of our different organizations taking concrete steps. And I will just say I resonate with Secretary Ross's comments. OPR is very small. We have the opposite problem of some of you with 1 million departments. We're very tiny, and we also have the BCP does not get approved, have to do stuff with the resources we have problems. So I am with you on this, very committed, but it might be a little slower. Go ahead.
Sorry, Chair. I was just going to also offer, if it's helpful, if the resolution does pass, we can work with key staff to also articulate follow-up and sort of implementation of it, both through our racial equity action plan, through core. There's a lot of avenues through which this can be supported, and we can articulate those more clearly also for the council members.
Great, thank you. Any other council commentary on this resolution? I'm going to go to public comment. If not, I know we do have public comment on this item. I don't see any other hands. So Sandra, turn it to you to facilitate public comment. And we are going to be giving 2 minutes per comment, just as a reminder.
Yes, that's right, Chair Gordon. Thank you very much. I had pasted in the chat during the break the list of folks who signed up for this, but I'm going to read those names again. Thank you already for having raised your hands. Justin Rausa, Linda Tenerowitz. We're going to move her to the end of the list because we're troubleshooting with her on a connection issue right now. Emmy Wang, Shireen Malakavsali, Ashley Horn, Elena Santamaria, and Emily Lamb. That's our list of folks who are signed up for public comment. When I call your name, we'll unmute your microphone And after you accept the unmute, you'll be able to begin speaking immediately. And then if you're connecting by phone, we'll also unmute your microphone that way. So I think we're ready to go with the first speaker, Justin Rausa.
Good afternoon, Ms. Chair and honorable members of the council. Justin Rausa on behalf of the Berkeley Food Institute at UC Berkeley, a food system think tank at Cal working on urban and rural agroecology, wages and working conditions in the food system, and immigration. We applaud the extensive work SGC staff have put into the Racial Equity Action Plan and today's resolution. BFI supports the state's efforts to pursue equitable outcomes. For example, connecting farm workers and farm worker housing with opportunities with and across SALC or the AHSC programs. We echo opening remarks from council members about the importance of the resolution, as well as some of the brief discussion amongst the council members potentially having SGC being the long-term institutional holder of the promise and responsibility of this work. There was an article just yesterday in the New York Times about our farm workers, the ones working in the fields to put food on our table, who not only are disproportionately impacted by COVID, but are also continuing to work through the heat wave and even now in the ash and airborne debris from the fires. BFI believes and hopes that the state departments and agencies involved will only be more prepared should voters choose to repeal Prop 209 in November, giving you and your colleagues a head start on maximizing the potential of our state's human capital. And since I have just brief time left, on a personal note, as the HIAP postgrad intern stationed at OPR 8 years ago when Secretary Crowfoot was the OPR's deputy director, I applaud this line of inquiry and commitment to racial equity by the SGC. At that time, I was OPR's only intern of color in those beloved basement cubicles on the corner of 10th and N. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Justin. I don't think that our current folks miss being in those basement cubicles all that much right now. I think they're probably a little happier at home, but it does foster community for sure. Thanks for your service and thanks for your comments.
Next is Emmy Wang with the Greenlining Institute.
Emmy, do we have you?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Now we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emmy Wang with the Greenlining Institute. We are an Oakland-based but statewide facing policy, research, and leadership development organization working for racial and economic justice. We're excited to offer comment today in appreciation of the focus of today's meeting and in support of the racial equity resolution, which is an important step for any agency, especially one that convenes a multi-agency body to prioritize governmental action on racial equity. If we understand that the racial inequities and oppressions in our country to be structural and systemic, created and upheld by generations of racist governmental policies, then our actions to address racial inequity must also in turn be structural and systemic. So it's so important for this racial equity work to be championed and carried out by government at all levels. We see this resolution as being an important foundation, but a first foundation nonetheless. As many council members have already noted, a resolution is only a commitment, and it's in the practice and growing and evolving of racial equity practices that's going to be so important moving forward. What we know is that the hard work comes in operationalizing and implementing tangible actions and policies to achieve racial justice, and Greenlining is committed to working with the agency on that. And just like equity can't be siloed into kind of one chapter, one section, one strategy, the commitment to equity shouldn't just be siloed to SGC and its member agencies, but also spread amongst the state family. That's why we've encouraged the state of California to establish a statewide Office of Racial Equity to establish what it is that the state needs to do to make equity a function of every state agency, both internally and externally. With that, we look forward to continuing to work with SGC to turn the commitment to racial equity into action and policy. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Emmy, and thanks for the great work you and Greenlining are doing every day in this space. Sandra?
Shireen Malikabsali with San Mateo County Health, please. And we're unmuting you now.
Wonderful, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair Gordon and members of the council. My name is Shireen Malik Afzali. I manage the Health Policy and Planning Program at San Mateo County Health. San Mateo County is the county just south of San Francisco, just north or hits up against the southern or the northern part of Silicon Valley. I'm also a member of the California Department of Public Health's Office of Health Equities Community Advisory Council. I'm joining today to support the Strategic Growth Council's racial equity resolution that focuses on committing to actions. As a local health department, we are clear that our work to achieve health isn't possible without addressing racial inequities. That makes racial equity core to our work, but this is much bigger than one agency, county, or community. Our research shows that clinical care contributes to only about 20% of a person's health, so 80% of people's health are held in efforts of other agencies such as transportation, planning, housing, and more. And you're all much more familiar than this little bit about it, given the Health and All Policies work that you do and the Strategic Growth Council as a whole. Our county health department has been engaged in GARE for about 4 years, slowly working on our racial equity plan, and COVID and the George Floyd tragedy and murder has further increased the need for us to focus on racial equity and actually start to call out white supremacy more directly. More staff and community leaders are really asking for actions and not just statements condemning racism. Clarity and accountability are really critical, which is what you're bringing to the table today. COVID has a lot of our attention and we're incredibly stretched, but it's illuminated the structural inequities that faced by our communities of color that are now hitting a tipping point. So more than ever, we really need commitments to implementing actions that really shift our institutions to ensure a different reality for our next generations. You, as the Strategic Growth Council, have been innovative and leaders in this work for a very long time. And I hope that sharing the adoption of this work and the continued monitoring will really help us inspire our local health department, inspire our local communities to move from conversation and planning to deep action, monitoring, and accountability. Thank you for your leadership on this work and all the staff and amazing work that was heard today.
Thanks so much, Shireen, for your comments, and I really appreciate those. Sandra?
Ashley Horn, Government Alliance on Race and Equity. She's being unmuted. Oh,
can you hear me?
Yeah.
You have an echo, Ashley. I don't know if that's. Try talking again.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
I was joined by both phone and computer in case there were tech issues.
Perfect.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to address you today. I am joining with a lot of excitement and want to share some words in support of the Racial Equity Action Plan work and the Racial Equity Resolution before you. I have the pleasure of serving as the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, GARES, California Regional Manager, working in a larger organization called Race Forward. I have had the pleasure and honor of working with CORE in 2019 and 2020 with a new cohort that just launched, and I'm excited to support the work into 2021. We have a model, a theory of change model that talks about normalizing, organizing, and operationalizing racial equity in the governmental sector. And that is exactly what you see before you, evidenced in this resolution. This is where we have moved from the normalizing, where people are comfortable talking about race and have a sense of shared urgency, the organizing, working cross-departmentally, et cetera. And this is actually the doing of that work, the commitment and measurement of it. The significance of doing this across a state government is huge and worth special recognition. We have over 200 different jurisdictions across the United States joining us in the National Government Alliance for Race and Equity, Racial Equity Justice Movement. And we don't have another state government committing in the same way in which California is. California is leading the nation in this action today, and it's worth celebration. Really want to support all of the work that SGC is doing, and really the core work with Holly and others leading and supporting that work have been part of several conversations where you see people move from just beginning level understanding into actually doing the work within their respective state agencies. So with that, just want to say thank you so much for taking this up and giving it the importance that it deserves.
Thanks, Ashley. Appreciate it.
Great. Next is Elena Santamaria with Next Gen Policy. And I just want to note that there does tend to be a little lag between the time I say the name and it unmutes. So we'll just be patient with that.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. Thank you so much for allowing us the chance to speak about this resolution. My name is Elena Santamaria. I work for Next Gen Policy. We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting and advocating progressive policies and uplifting the millennial voice. First and foremost, we want to thank the Strategic Growth Council for bringing up this resolution and the Health in All Policies push, particularly in the work that they've done in the past 10 years to bring racial equity to the forefront of how government operates. A couple of notes that we'd like to share with you in terms of some feedback is to really to highlight what the council member is talking about and assess what the state is currently doing across agencies. Some agencies do have racial equity programs, some don't, some have offices, and to really get an understanding and the lay of the land of what currently exists and how to build off of that foundation, as well as hiring practices. Some of the classifications for the workforce don't actually give people the opportunity for someone who may not have access the way that others do to start from scratch and really get into government and to provide more equitable opportunities for people to get into government. As well as language, we really appreciate Secretary Kim's update on the transportation of changing names. We think language is so important, especially when it comes to government, to really be inclusive of all ethnic communities and people. So words like minority in describing people of color or underserved communities really does impact, I think, the efficacy of what we're trying to accomplish here. And lastly, we'd like to bring up the issue of transparency, and Secretary Blumenfield brought it up a little bit in terms of the resolution, in terms of accountability. We really think in terms of being able to move progress forward is to hold folks accountable, and particularly if they're the racial equity plans that the departments do take, to make those plans transparent and accessible to the public. Again, we really do appreciate the work of the Strategic Growth Council and look forward to working with you all in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Elena, and appreciate some really concrete suggestions in there. I really appreciate that. Sandra?
Emily Lamb, San Francisco Public Utilities Commission.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. My name is Emily Lamb. I'm the Director of Government Affairs at the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, a $1.8 billion department of the city of San Francisco that provides water, power, and sewer services in the Bay Area. I'm commenting today in support of the racial equity resolution and all the great work that Jesse Buendia and others on staff have been doing. We ourselves are heavily engaged currently in internal racial equity work and recently passed a racial equity resolution at our commission. Externally, we've been working on these issues for quite some time as well, including being very active in GARE and promoting all the great work that GARE is doing. So we are very aware as a government agency ourselves of the opportunities and challenges, and look forward to working with everyone to forward racial equity in government. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Emily.
Great. And Chair Gordon, our last comment on this item is from Linda Tenarowitz. And I just wanted to say, if there's anyone else who wanted to comment on this item, raise your hand in Zoom or press *9. Otherwise, we'll move on after this comment. Linda. Looks like we're working to unmute Linda now. There she is.
Oh, hi, can folks hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. And apologies for the technical challenges. Appreciate everyone on your team who's been helping me on the back end. But my name is Linda Tenarowitz. I'm a statewide policy advocate for the California Pan-Ethnic Health Network. And we just want to express our appreciation for this resolution and the deliberate nature of it to really contribute to racial equity within state government. We'd also like to highlight the fourth bullet in particular around stakeholder engagement, and particularly with communities and communities of color. So we are really eager to continue to work together and ensure that we're meeting the needs and the disparities that we see. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Great comment. Did we have anyone else, Sandra?
No further comments on this item.
Okay, so can I ask that the resolution be put up again? And is it possible to include the amendment to the resolution that we discussed? Can you put that in, or should we can just restate it, I guess? I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if this is a PDF or if it's an active slide. Well, I'm going to assume it's happening as we speak. So we're going to go to a vote on the resolution. The resolution has a small amendment from Secretary Blumenfeld, who I actually believe has been replaced by Deputy Secretary Lauren Sanchez. There she is. So Lauren, your boss recommended this amendment, so you probably should support it.
So supported.
Just so you know. So thank you for being here. Appreciate it. So the resolution has, just in its new form, just as a reminder of the item 4 amendment, now includes commits to using at least 2 public council meetings as the amendment. Otherwise, the resolution is the same. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Secretary Ross, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. Councilor Ramirez, let's do a roll call on the resolution.
Chair Gordon.
Aye.
Assistant Secretary Soulier.
Aye.
Deputy Secretary Hansen.
Or
here.
Secretary Copeland, aye.
Or Kim. I see Secretary Crowfoot.
There, who said aye.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Deputy Secretary Musavi.
Aye.
Secretary Ross.
Aye.
Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Aye.
And Deputy Secretary Sanchez.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Fantastic. Congratulations to everybody, and thank you again to all of the staff. Jesse, it's looking at you, so to you, but all of the staff that have been working full-time across all of our agencies to make sure that this is something we think about not just occasionally, but every day, and operationalize into our practices and policies. So thank you for that. Yay. All right. Nicely done. All right, moving on to agenda item 7. We have an action item around technical assistance guidelines, and I'm going to turn it over to Kiran Kumar.
Thank you, Chair Gordon, members of the council. Before getting started, I just wanted to yet again applaud what an incredible and historic action that was just taken. And it's really an honor to follow up on that item and to actually talk about ways that SGC, through our technical assistance and capacity building work, implements elements of our race equity action plan through some of this work. My name is Kiran Kumar, and I am the Community Assistance for Climate Equity Program Manager at SGC. Over the next 2 presentations, our team will provide you with an update on our technical assistance and capacity building work, both now and moving forward. Next slide, please, Fabiha. In this presentation, we will introduce the Community Assistance for Climate Equity team and how our work encompasses a suite of technical assistance programs really focused on under-resourced communities. We'll also talk through new technical assistance guidelines that pull together best practices and proven effective methods for maximizing technical assistance. Next slide. So today we are asking the council to approve the technical assistance guidelines as directed by Senate Bill 1072 by Senator Leyva. Next slide, please. SGC's Community Assistance for Climate Equity team, or CASE, as Jesse mentioned earlier, is an inclusive team representing SGC's full suite of technical assistance and capacity building work. SGC has been delivering technical assistance to California communities since 2015, as the council is aware, beginning with a pilot program and then expanding year over year. Increasingly, it's become apparent that further upstream support is absolutely necessary for California's most under-resourced communities to be able to fully benefit from the suite of state climate investment. In 2018, Senate Bill 1072 tasked SGC with developing the Regional Climate Collaboratives Grant Program and the technical assistance guidelines for state agencies that we're here to talk about today. This approach really intentionally combined and grew our efforts around technical assistance and capacity building. And though the Regional Climate Collaboratives Program has not received implementation funding yet, we are excited to come back to the council at a later date with an update on that critical capacity building program. Next slide. So while the council is familiar with the California Climate Investments TA program with an update actually in front of the council almost a year ago today, we wanted to use today's time to provide some further updates on the program and then discuss the value of this work in under-resourced communities, especially now. Next slide. Technical assistance is defined as the provision of targeted support to an agency, organization, or community with a development need or gap. TA includes often one-on-one consultation, technical analysis, community engagement, and many other strategies to augment the capacity of an under-resourced applicant. SGC provides three main types of TA. So the first being capacity building, which really helps communities carry out a range of activities to advance climate and equity goals over the long term. The focus of this kind of work is moving towards self-sustained work. On the other hand, application assistance takes place during a funding window and helps communities navigate often complex application processes. Many think of this as grant writing support, but involves quite a few other kind of technical aspects related to putting forth really effective applications. And then finally, in some cases, we provide technical assistance after an award has been made to enable under-resourced communities to effectively implement their projects fully. Next slide. In order to provide technical assistance for California climate investment programs, SGC develops partners with other administering agencies to define the scope and design of each program. We work closely with program staff to fund and manage the TA, ensuring that it's reflective both of best practices as well as agency priorities. Next slide. Over the past 5+ years, we've really seen the impact of the CCI TA program grow, not only in resulting in increased success for communities in accessing funding, but also informing a number of best practices and strategies to continue expanding effective TA. Listed here are some of the more exciting outcomes and approaches of this TA work this year, which along with the wisdom of our technical assistance working group, which Ina will talk about in a moment, have really informed these guidelines. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ina Lupin, to discuss the guidelines in more depth.
Great, thank you, Kieran. And good afternoon, council members and Chair Gordon. As Kieran said, my name is Ina Lupin, and I'm the Community Assistance Program Manager on the Community Assistance for Climate Equity team. I'll be explaining to you the process of developing SGC's TA guidelines for state agencies and summarizing the content and next steps for the document. Next slide, please. The enabling legislation for the TA guidelines is Senate Bill 1072, which was authored by Senator Connie Leyva. The guidelines are meant for state agency staff who are looking to provide technical assistance and capacity building services for the first time, or who are looking to expand upon or improve existing TA efforts. The guidelines make it possible to institutionalize the lessons we've learned through our CCI TA program and to share the best practices of our state agency partners who help develop these guidelines. Next slide, please. We took a highly collaborative approach when developing these guidelines to ensure that they incorporate a diverse set of perspectives. We brought together an impressive group of experts to develop these guidelines, including 22 work group members from 13 different agencies. The secretaries on our council will recognize many of these agencies and departments under your supervision. The work group members provided diverse and multi-sectoral experience related to TA and capacity building and met frequently over several months to share their expertise and provide valuable input into the content of the guidelines. Next slide, please. We also knew that it was critical to gather public input for this guidance document, since it's ultimately meant to benefit California communities. And so in early 2020, our team held listening sessions with approximately 40 entities who provided rich input to inform the development of the TA guidelines, as well as SGC's broader TA and capacity building efforts. We also released a draft of the guidelines for public comment and received really helpful feedback that we were able to incorporate into the current version. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to provide some detail about the content of the document. The TA guidelines include the sections you see highlighted here, including the core principles of technical assistance, which I will expand on in a moment. We also have a section detailing best practices for carrying out a gap analysis and understanding technical assistance needs so that state agency staff can effectively design their TA programs. We also have sections on contracting, project management, evaluation, and communications. There will also be an appendix that is specific to providing technical assistance to tribes, because we recognized early on that special consideration should be taken into account when providing TA for tribal governments and tribal serving organizations. This appendix is on a different timeline from the rest of the guidelines to leave plenty of time for tribal input, and it will be open for tribal comment later this year in the fall. We also highlighted a number of case studies as a part of the TA guidelines to give concrete examples of what TA can look like on the ground. Next slide, please. Now I want to highlight the 7 core principles that our work group recommended should be central in any TA or capacity building effort carried out at the state level. The first is social equity. In line with the rest of our conversation today, the work group emphasized that social and racial equity should be central to TA and capacity building. This means prioritizing under-resourced communities and households for TA, but also ensuring that the TA results in equitable outcomes within communities as well. The second is mutual learning. Learning should be a two-way street so that we can learn from communities about the barriers they face in applying for our programs at the same time that we are providing TA. The third is cultural awareness. TA should be culturally and linguistically appropriate, and when possible, TA providers should represent the communities they're serving. Fourth is local relevance. TA should be context sensitive and adaptive to conditions on the ground. COVID-19 is an extreme example of how unexpected events can shift our priorities and needs, but flexibility is really important even in more normal times to ensure that TA stays relevant. Fifth is community engagement. TA should strive to engage diverse stakeholders in priority setting and decision-making, particularly ensuring that the most vulnerable community members are meaningfully involved. Sixth is trust. TA is a really great opportunity to build trust between the state and local communities, especially when it's carried out in a manner that emphasizes respect and relationship building. And then lastly, building community capacity. We should really focus our TA on not so much doing things for communities, but on building skills and making connections that will enable them to carry the torch forward after the TA ends. Next slide, please. So just for some next steps, we plan to reformat the TA guidelines to include them in a web-based toolkit, which will include other resources, templates, and case studies. We also plan to proactively engage with agencies to get out the word about the guidelines, and would love to have the council members and key staff share them with your agencies and departments. As I mentioned before, the Tribal Technical Assistance Appendix will be released for tribal comment this fall and presented to the council in December of this year. And to implement the TA guidelines, our team will continue to expand our SGC's leadership and support state agencies in providing TA. Lastly, we plan for this to be a living document, and we plan to update the TA guidelines at least every 2 years. Next slide, please. And so with that, we recommend that the council approve the technical assistance guidelines as directed by SB 1072, and look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ina and Kieran. This is an opportunity for council members first, and then we will of course have public comment, but council members to ask any clarifying questions or make any comments on the presentation or on the guidelines. Karen.
No, I just want to commend the staff and the working group on this. We've just seen firsthand how powerful a fairly small investment in technical assistance can make, and it's going to have long living results and impact. So I just want to thank you all for the work that you did and how you've laid this out. I think it's very well done. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a nice comment. I completely agree. Other comments or questions? I had a quick question, which is more of an operational one, and maybe it goes to Louise, which is, I know 1072 was did not provide for ongoing support for the administrative functions under 1072. So how are you thinking about the consistent updates given that reality?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if Louise wants to jump in, or Kieran, also feel free. We are sort of working on a BCP to look at how we can continue funding our team, and also plan on continuing the CCITA work. And I think that whoever continues in this role would be able to continue working on the technical assistance guidelines. We also plan on continuing to work with our work group to continue updating it. I think there's a lot of really great capacity at the state level with folks who have been doing technical assistance and capacity building work. And so, yeah, I think that's the plan. But yeah, would love for others to jump in as well if you have thoughts on that.
No, I think that's correct. We're seeking to continue funding through BCP. We've also applied for some federal, funding and are continuing to seek opportunities in that regard as well.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate that. I think sometimes that we get, I know you all have this experience, we get legislation that puts something in place and then it needs to live on beyond the term of the legislation. And it's always the question of how do you make that happen? So really appreciate you being proactive about that. Any other council member questions, comments? All right, we have a couple of public comments. It looks like Sandra.
Yes, that's right, Chair Gordon. Let me get my camera on here too. The first comment is from Emmy Wang. The next comment will be from Natalie Hernandez. And I also see a hand raised, Christine Vitarelli. And so if you do want to comment on this item, Christine, just keep your hand up and I'll call on you at the end of this period. So we can get started with Emmy Wang with the Greenlining Institute.
All right, good afternoon again to the Madam Chair and the council members. Again, this is Emmy Wang with the Greenlining Institute, and here to offer comment to express support of SGC's technical assistance guidelines. Greenlining was a co-sponsor of SB 1072 back in 2016, and are therefore really encouraged and heartened to see progress on SB 1072 implementation. Our purpose then and now was to provide more equitable opportunity for every community, including our most vulnerable, to lead on local climate actions through both capacity building and the increased provision of technical assistance from the state. And we're excited to see in the TA guidelines a really solid starting framework and manual for technical assistance delivery. In particular, we applaud the inclusion of the core principles rooted in racial and social equity and an understanding of historical and present day oppression. The core principles send a strong signal from the state that technical assistance provision must be guided by the needs and visions of California's most under-resourced communities. In the future, we hope to see incorporation of increased high road standards on technical assistance delivery, and specifically standards on how agencies should provide technical assistance to meet the needs of priority populations. We know that the agency has the opportunity to set the bar for the type of TA that all agencies should strive to deliver, and that without an articulated and clear baseline for what may be considered quality technical assistance, we may continue to accept substandard technical assistance performance. So such standards, especially for under-resourced communities, would offer a clearer roadmap for how to operationalize the core principles of equity, and ties in with a discussion on the racial equity plan, how to operationalize a commitment into action. We also appreciate the inclusion of Greenlining's Making Equity Real framework into the guidance document because we know that the practice of operationalizing equity is one that we all have to work on together. We similarly appreciate all the hard work that went into this document to begin to codify technical assistance as critical to building the capacity for all communities to lead on local climate actions, and look forward to continuing to work with SGC on equitable technical assistance delivery. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your comments. Sandra?
Yeah, Natalie Hernandez, Climate Resolve.
Hi, this is Natalie from Climate Resolve. Thanks for hearing me out. I'm the Associate Director of Climate Planning and Resilience, and I'm lucky to have been involved in the California Climate Investment Programs through various experiences since the beginning. And I'm currently a technical assistance provider for ASIC and one of the implementing partners for the Partners Advancing Climate Equity Program. I think the TA guidelines are a good start, but I think they fall short of simplifying the processes of grant applications for the state. I think the state right now is approaching TA with wanting to provide more robust TA, wanting to provide like more TA, but I think some of the work also needs to be done in the other direction of simplifying the processes and grants, which take a lot of time, sometimes hundreds of hours by small communities to put these grant applications together. And myself as a TA provider, I realize I have a privilege in actually getting paid to work on some of this, but the municipalities and even community-based organizations don't, and sometimes they risk losing money just putting the hours into the application. So I encourage like the TA, future TA to look into reimbursements for small municipalities and also community-based organizations that are putting this together. I think PACE is the first cohort kind of based program that will stipend or give mini grants to cohort members. So that's a good start. And then to follow back on the other comment about just simplifying the processes, one thing that Climate Resolve did this year was work with the CalAdapt team to make a better tool for reporting climate data. And so that's something that I think that technical assistance providers currently can do is just work with state agencies to simplify the processes. It doesn't necessarily mean, I don't know, that there's more work involved. I think it really is just going back to simplifying and making sure that these processes are digestible and understandable to the applicants. So thank you for taking the time to look into this and really emphasize the importance of TA.
Thanks so much, and thanks for the work that you're doing to operationalize it. Appreciate it.
Great, and just one more comment on this item from Christine Vitarelli, City of Arvin.
Good afternoon. This is Christine Vitarelli with the City of Arvin. I just first and foremost wanted to thank everybody for thinking out of the box and coming up with these technical assistance programs. I can tell you personally that Arvin was a recipient of the BOOST program through ILG and the Strategic Growth Council. That program has substantially increased our capacity, especially for a disadvantaged community that has very limited staff and needed boots on the ground. Through our work with our Civic Spark and the ILG Institute, it was amazing how much work we could accomplish and set goals and priorities over the last year. So I want to show my appreciation for that. I would really urge everybody to continue to provide technical support programs such as the BOOST program. I'd love to see that pilot program expanded. I'd love to see other disadvantaged communities have the opportunities that Arvin had this year and perhaps subsequent years of funding where we could continue our goals. But I wanted to say thank you very much to the council and show my gratitude and appreciation and let you know that these technical assistance programs are very effective, very impactful for disadvantaged communities. And so I thank you.
Thanks so much, Christine. It's really, really good to hear that from folks who are using these programs and finding them valuable. So really appreciate it. I think, Sandra, am I right? That was our last public comment?
That's correct.
I also know that we've had some substitutions of folks, just maintaining quorum here, but Amanda is back for Secretary Crowfoot. Secretary Castro Ramirez, it looks like you're still here, but I know that you will be leaving us in just a second and putting in an alternate. But I think we still have quorum. Am I right about that, staff? I'm sorry that I'm having a hard time seeing everybody. Is anyone worried? Let me just, okay, I'll just count everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, good. Great. It's always hard when you're not sure you have quorum. It makes it's another thing to manage. All right, so we are going to, let's go back to the recommended action and take a minute on that. And then I would like to see if there's a motion.
I'll move. Karen
Great.
Ross.
Karen Ross, thank you. Any
I'll
second?
second.
Thank you, Darwin. Can we do a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Gordon.
Aye.
Assistant Secretary Soulier.
Aye.
Deputy Secretary Hansen.
Aye.
Deputy Secretary Mosavi.
Aye.
Secretary Ross.
Aye.
Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Aye.
And Deputy Secretary Sanchez.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. We are going to now welcome back Kiran Kumar for another technical assistance item related to HSC. Kiran.
Yes, I promised you I would be back, and I just want to thank everybody. I know we're going over on time, so we'll try to speed things up here, but it's an honor to now have followed on the race equity statement approval, as well as the approval of these technical assistance guidelines. So I'm here to provide further updates on the California Climate Investments Technical Assistance Program, specifically with a look to the future. There were a couple comments in the previous presentation about kind of what our plans are moving forward, and I hope this presentation can help answer some of that. I also just wanted to take a moment before proceeding to appreciate the Council's historic investment in this work and ongoing recognition, probably at every single one of our Council meetings, of TA as really a critical component of SGC success. Next slide, please. In this presentation, I'll provide further background on the program with a focus specifically on the program's funding and partnership history, an update on program impact seen through the lens of 3 different case studies, and then insights into how we see further investment in technical assistance as a key strategy for supporting communities despite the potential for less available grant funding due to current economic factors. Next slide, please. Today, we are asking the Council to approve a $2 million expenditure of fiscal year 2019-2020 Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program continuous appropriation funds to support continued technical assistance activities that reduce greenhouse gas emissions through projects that implement land use, housing, transportation, and agricultural land preservation practices. Next slide, please. The CCITA program was initiated in 2015 as a pilot program and has since been expanded upon through 3 different budget appropriations, and most significantly, a council action in 2018 that approved an expenditure of $5 million in AHSC continuous appropriation funds for 3 new technical assistance programs. Next slide, please. These are the primary technical assistance programs housed at SGC and include technical assistance that spans capacity building, application assistance, and implementation across numerous different communities. For sake of time, why don't we move on to the next slide? So as mentioned previously, we use TA funding to partner with other agencies to provide TA across CCI funding programs. Increasingly, as the program has evolved, we're moving towards a model where SGC provides initial funding for the technical assistance in the first year of the program, and then supports in subsequent rounds with either match funding or program management assistance. This enables us to sustain technical assistance while serving more agencies and programs across the state. To illustrate the impact of these partnerships, we've selected 3 different case studies whose strategies and considerations are captured within the technical assistance guidelines. And so what this means is we now actually have a tool in place to work with agencies across the state to further these kinds of programs and the successes that they see. Next slide, please. The first case study is on the technical assistance provided for CDFA's Climate Smart Ag programs. Through a partnership between SGC, CDFA, and UCANR, the program funds 10 community education specialists who are embedded in communities throughout the state, who carry out both trainings for growers as kind of capacity building support, as well as application assistance for the 3 different grant programs. This approach is really built on an understanding that trust, relationship building, and sustained engagement is central to effective technical assistance. Next slide, please. The second case study is on technical assistance for the active transportation program administered by Caltrans. In 2018, SGC partnered with Caltrans to provide TA for 5 disadvantaged communities that had never received an ATP award. Despite the fact that cycle 4 of the program was its most competitive cycle to date, 3 of the 5 technical assistance recipients were awarded funding. So following positive feedback from the applicants themselves, Caltrans has actually taken it on to fund further rounds of this technical assistance, expanding from 5 recipients to 10 applicants this year, including 2 tribes. Next slide, please. The last case study that we've chosen to highlight is our BOOST pilot program, who you heard referenced in public comment just a minute ago. This program was created in partnership with the Institute for Local Government and works with 10 cities and 2 regions throughout the state to advance social equity and climate action through tailored capacity building. So with that, I'll actually turn it over to our guest, Carly Brown, who is a program director for the Institute for Local Government.
Great, thank you so much, Kiernan. Like Kiernan said, my name is Carly Brown, and I'm a director at the Institute for Local Government, and I oversee our Sustainable Communities program, which includes our housing and health work, as well as our BOOST program. Next slide. To provide a little more background on this, the BOOST program is a 2-year pilot program that we developed in partnership with the Strategic Growth Council back in 2018. In developing this program, we aim to create a really flexible technical assistance program to advance social equity and climate action in a way that was really responsive to a variety of diverse communities throughout the state. So as you see on this slide, we selected 10 cities in 2 regions, all with very pressing needs and unique opportunities, different geographies, varying capabilities, and a variety of goals and objectives. So with each of these partner communities, we developed a unique plan. And today we have some really exciting outcomes to share with you. Next slide. Since the beginning of this program, we helped our partners apply for 46 grants, earning almost $45 million. This includes a $20 million infill infrastructure grant from the Department of Housing and Community Development for the town of Mammoth Lakes, which is the largest grant this small rural town has ever received. In addition, our BOOST team has facilitated dozens of partnerships between our local partners, CBOs, state agencies, and private sector organizations to develop programs, projects, and grants, including a $6 million urban flood protection grant and a successful Prop 84 wildfire recovery and resilience grant for the city of Ventura. We have connected all 12 of our BOOST communities to various other state TA providers, including those for AHSC, SALC, TCC, Prop 64 or Prop 68, IIG, SB2, LEAP, and STEP and ATP, for which my team is scrambling back at the office to help put on the finishing touches before the deadline coming up on Monday. We have provided ILG's comprehensive tiers public engagement training and facilitation services to 4 BOOST cities, including San Diego, Arcata, Salinas, and El Centro, which has helped our partners adapt to the virtual environment created by COVID and help them gain confidence and capacity for future engagement efforts. We also helped to secure a Civic Spark Fellow for 2 BOOST communities, Paramount and Arvin, to assist with energy-related projects thanks to the generous funding and partnership of the California Energy Commission. And last but not least, we helped secure resources and assistance for 6 BOOST communities to create or update climate action and resilience plans, which will serve as a lasting roadmap of improved sustainability, health, and equity in these communities. Please advance the slide. Through our BOOST pilot program, we have learned the importance of being flexible and tailoring our technical assistance to address the evolving needs of our partners so that they can adapt to real-time circumstances. The holistic approach makes it possible to connect BOOST communities with a variety of grant opportunities, including federal, state, regional, and philanthropic funding sources. The flexibility of the program enables responsiveness to the community's evolving needs, particularly with COVID-19. And the duration of the partnership helps create and cultivate trust, understanding, and knowledge about these communities' needs. We are so proud of the assistance we've provided through the Boost program, and I would love to give a thank you to our local government partners for trusting us in this pilot program, and to the Strategic Growth Council for your partnership and support. We're so grateful to have this opportunity to learn, grow, and support these communities in their journey towards a more sustainable, resilient, and just community. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Carly. Fabiha, can we get the next slide, please? So I think it's become clear both through just a couple of these case studies, as well as the previous discussion we had on the technical assistance guidelines, that despite the topics addressed by the technical assistance, we really see these services as being effective across the board in addressing historic racial and social inequities around accessing funding at the local level, as well as building long-term strategies for sustained climate adaptation and resilience. Next slide, please. So moving forward, we see an opportunity to further this work in 3 key areas. This strategy is informed by engagement conducted by this team over the past year to really understand technical assistance and capacity building needs at the community level. Each approach is focused on furthering the AHSC statutory objectives, which are listed out in more detail within the staff report. The first approach is really continuing and expanding upon our efforts to provide TA for the CCI funding programs. This approach includes application and implementation assistance, as well as capacity building in some cases, like with the AHSC program. The second area of focus is on place-based capacity building programs that are not necessarily specific to any one individual CCI program, like the Boost program that we just highlighted. This approach enables the state to employ a much more flexible approach to technical assistance to assist communities in thinking through their climate action strategies, understanding the funding sources available to them, and then beginning the process of applying to those programs. We also see a lot of value in this approach, given the need for communities to be able to access local, state, and federal funding in light of the impacts of COVID-19. And then finally, we see a lot of value in expanding technical assistance to tribal communities, given the unique challenges faced by tribes in competing for CCI funding. Under this approach, SGC would develop further partnerships with agencies whose programs are eligible for tribes and coordinate more closely with agency tribal liaisons. To Councilmember Castro Ramirez's earlier question, we see this focus on tribal TA as a really strong way to support moving from kind of ideology and planning to strong implementation by working in partnership with tribes to identify not just potential state funding, but also federal funding as well. Next slide, please. We're confident that this approach to technical assistance will lead to several short and long-term positive outcomes, including increased participation in CCI programs by under-resourced communities and much stronger projects overall. SGC is also contracted with an evaluation team this year who are assisting us in developing metrics for evaluation to apply both retroactively as well as for future TA programs and partnerships that would arise out of this expenditure. Next slide, please. So again, the recommended action is to approve a $2 million expenditure of fiscal year 2019-2020 Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program continuous appropriation funds to support continued technical assistance activities that reduce greenhouse gas emissions through projects that implement land use, housing, transportation, and agricultural land preservation practices. So with that, I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Kieran, and thanks, Carolee, and all the folks who've been involved in this set of projects. Any clarifying questions or comments from council members? That was a very comprehensive presentation, so I'm not seeing any. I know we have a couple of public comments on this item.
We do. The 2 folks signed up for public comment on this item are Michael McCormick and Chandler Van Schaak. If you could raise your hands in the Zoom interface if you're online, and if you've called in by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. For now, I see Chandler Van Schaak there. Michael McCormick maybe had to jump off, but we'll see if we can catch him after Chandler goes. The floor is yours, Chandler.
Thank you. I'm Chandler Van Schaak. I'm a senior planner at the town of Mammoth Lakes. And we just wanted to really express our appreciation for the Boost program. They've been extremely helpful for us, have provided us a variety of technical assistance, and have also just helped keep us informed about potential funding opportunities, particularly for a large affordable housing project that the town is working on now. It was actually the ILG through Boost who notified us of the infill infrastructure grant program and really helped us put together our application and get that submitted. And the town of Mammoth Lakes was awarded $22 million through that grant application, which is a huge deal for us. And you know, there's a good chance that we wouldn't have been able to make it happen without the folks at ILG through the Boost program. So we just really wanted to express our appreciation and say that it is really our hope that yes, additional funding for technical assistance programs and does get passed, and that we get to continue to work with these guys. So thank you.
Thanks, Chandler, and thank you for staying with us for 3+ hours. Very impressive. Did we find Michael McCormick?
I haven't found Michael McCormick yet. Michael McCormick, are you with us? If so, raise your hand. I think that's all, and we have no further comments registered on this item, Chair Gordon.
Okay, well, it looks like we are at, again, going to the item, the resolution, if we could, on the screen. Recommended action, again, you have heard, and looks like we're back at a motion if we have one.
I'll move.
Thank you, Lauren. Any second?
Second.
Who is that? Who second? Amanda. Great. Thank you. Can we do a roll call on this item, please?
Chair Gordon,
Aye.
Assistant Secretary Salia,
Aye.
Deputy Secretary Hansen,
Aye.
Deputy Secretary Musavi,
Aye.
Secretary Ross,
Aye.
Undersecretary Grant,
Aye.
and Deputy Secretary Sanchez.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Fantastic. And Melinda, thanks for joining us for that critical vote. Appreciate you keeping us at a quorum. And I should say to folks, there's a big meeting of the task force happening right now, which is partly why we lost several of our secretaries. So apologies for that. But very ably represented by the folks who we work with all the time on the key staff. So I'm thrilled to see you all. All right, I think we are at our item 9, which is general public comment on anything on which folks have not yet commented. So this is the open public comment period. Sandra, do we have any public comment?
We do have one comment registered by Cynthia Garcia with California Air Resources Board. I'm not seeing Cynthia on the participant list, but Cynthia, if you're here, please raise your hand. If you're on the phone, press *9. And if there's anybody else who had a public comment on an item not on the agenda, please raise your hand at this time and we'll call on you. Just giving a little pause to give people time in case they want to. Okay, Chair Gordon, seeing none.
We've outlasted everybody and have reached the end of the meeting. Thank you, folks. I really just want to appreciate everyone again for a very good discussion, particularly on the racial equity action item, as well as on technical assistance, which really is a great piece of evidence for what it means to implement the racial equity action planning into actual policy in terms of the way that that was rolled out. So just thank you to everybody for sticking with us and for staff. I wanted to specifically thank someone who's behind the scenes here, Fabiha Zaman, who ran the entire PowerPoint, helped set up the entire meeting, and is really just the person who makes it all run smoothly. So Fabiha, thank you for everything that you did to help us get the meeting going. And with that, meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.